let's slow things down. You don't have to listen too closely, just let your mind wander while we talk about something incredibly unimportant. And if you feel like these videos are of any use to you, then you can like and subscribe, but only if you really feel like it. And now, let's begin. You're standing in the bustling streets of 13th century Paris, and let's be honest, if you're trying to be the medieval equivalent of an influencer, your beauty game needs to be as sharp as a knight's sword. The idea of beauty isn't just about looking good, it's about surviving and thriving in a world where appearance can dictate your social standing. But before you get too comfortable with the notion of medieval beauty, understand this. It's a brutal, high-stakes game influenced by forces much bigger than your reflection. Let's dive into the role of the church. Imagine a time when every Sunday sermon didn't just tell you how to live a pious life, but also nudged you toward the godly look. The religious powers that be had a hand in shaping beauty ideals, preaching that a fair complexion was not just attractive, but a sign of moral purity. Yes, pale skin was all the rage, and not just because it looked good against a tapestry. It was a visible marker that you weren't one of the working masses labouring under the sun. Here's the kicker. The church didn't just suggest this, it practically enforced it. It's like having a fashion police that could send you to hell for your taste in foundation. Royalty, of course, had their own bizarre standards. Take Eleanor of Aquitaine, for instance. She was the Beyoncé of her time, setting trends left and right. When she favoured a particular style, everyone else followed. Monarchs were the medieval equivalent of today's Kardashians, dictating what was hot and what was not. Courtly love and chivalric ideals became intertwined with these beauty standards, leading to an obsession with delicate features and ethereal grace. If you were part of the nobility, there was no escape from this. It was like being trapped in a never-ending episode of Medieval Makeover. But looking the part wasn't cheap. Let's talk economics. Maintaining these beauty standards came with a hefty price tag. Cosmetics weren't your drugstore variety. They involved ingredients like lead and mercury. Yes, lead. It's the kind of stuff that would make a modern dermatologist break out in hives. The cost of these deadly concoctions was exorbitant, often equal to a month's wages for a regular craftsman. Yet, people shelled out the cash because looking beautiful was akin to owning a social passport. The financial burden extended beyond makeup. Clothing played a significant role in signalling status, with sumptuous fabrics and intricate embroidery reserved for the elite. If you weren't born into wealth, you faced a daily struggle, balancing the need to maintain appearances with the threat of financial ruin. Here's where it gets even more interesting. This beauty obsession had unexpected economic ripple effects. It created entire industries, from cosmetics production to clothing artisans, fueling a medieval version of the beauty economy. And let's not romanticize it, this was an economy where your looks could determine your fate. Social mobility was, in many ways, dictated by your ability to conform to these standards. Marriages, alliances, and even your livelihood could hinge on whether you fit the mold of beauty. Forget personality. Symmetry was your golden ticket. Next time you glance at medieval portraits, remember they were more than just artistic endeavours. They were the Instagram posts of their time, curated and polished to present the ideal image. These standards didn't just pop out of the blue. They were carefully crafted by the powers that be, both sacred and secular, to maintain a societal structure where beauty was power, and power was everything. So, there you are, navigating this complex web of appearance-driven politics. It's a world where every rouge-stained cheek and pale forehead tells a story of ambition, survival, and the sometimes absurd pursuit of beauty. Welcome to the medieval beauty pageant, where the stakes were life, love, and legacy. And speaking of medieval beauty pageants, let's cut to the chase about those physical traits everyone was lusting after. High foreheads, for example. Yep, you heard that right. If you thought your receding hairline was a modern-day woe, think again. In medieval times, a high forehead was the ultimate symbol of intelligence and nobility. Women would pluck their hairline to achieve this look, and let me tell you, it wasn't just a couple of tweezers worth. Imagine the lengths you'd go to if your social status depended on your forehead looking like it had its own zip code. Now, what about the coveted pale skin? It was practically the Instagram filter of the Middle Ages. But how did folks achieve that ghostly glow without the benefits of SPF 50 or a weekend indoors? Enter the world of medieval cosmetics, where the ingredients read more like a witch's brew than anything you'd want near your face. Lead-based powders were the go-to choice for that sought-after pallor. Yes, lead, because nothing screams beauty quite like a toxin that can slowly poison you. But hey, if you're desperate to look like you haven't seen the sun in decades, what's a little lead poisoning between friends? And while we're on the topic of questionable beauty practices, let's not forget bloodletting. Imagine going to a spa day in 1250, and instead of a facial, you're getting your veins open to drain out some of that pesky blood. The idea was to balance the humours. Those medieval health theories that sound more like an improv group than medical advice. Bloodletting was believed to improve one's complexion by getting rid of impurities. In reality, it probably just made you woozy and paler than you ever wanted to be. But hey, at least you looked the part of a delicate noble, even if you were one fainting spell away from collapsing into a pile of brocade. And here's the kicker. These beauty standards weren't just about looking good for the next courtly ball. They reflected a broader societal obsession with class and morality. The paler you were, the less you seemed to work in the sun, aligning you with the leisure class who had time to think deep thoughts and write bad poetry. It's like the medieval version of flaunting that you work from a laptop in exotic locations today, except with a lot more arsenic and fewer Instagram likes. But let's get into the economics of this beauty madness. Achieving these looks wasn't just a casual expense. Lead-based cosmetics, imported silks, and those hair-plucking sessions required serious cash. A pot of ceruse, that's lead-based face powder, to you and me, might set you back a month's wages, which is quite the investment when you consider the potential side effects, like death. Yet people were willing to pay the price, not just for vanity's sake, but because these beauty standards were tied up with political and social power. It's not just that beauty was skin deep, it was also deeply tied to your ability to climb the social ladder. And don't think the men were exempt from this rigmarole. Knights and courtiers weren't just flexing their muscles in jousting tournaments, they were also busy trying to maintain a manly appearance. A chiseled jawline was as desirable then as it is now, and knights would go to great lengths to keep themselves looking ruggedly handsome. But their beauty routines were less about cosmetics and more about showcasing their prowess in hunting and battle. After all, nothing says eligible bachelors like coming home with a deer slung over your shoulder, right? So, as we peel back the layers of medieval beauty, it becomes clear that these ideals were less about the aesthetics and more about the control of social dynamics. In a world where class boundaries were rigid and your birth often dictated your life's trajectory, appearing beautiful was one of the few ways to potentially alter your fate. And if it meant dousing yourself in toxic chemicals or living in perpetual eyebrow-plucking pain, well, that was just the price of admission to the social elite. But don't pack away your modern skincare routine just yet. We've still got plenty more to unravel in the world of medieval beauty and its bizarre practices. From the dubious health treatments of the day to the power plays behind every powdered face, the saga is only beginning. Stick around, because this beauty journey is far from over. And just when you thought medieval beauty trends couldn't get any more eyebrow-raising, or plucking as it were, let's dive into the tangled world of hair, makeup, and fashion. Yes, folks, the trifecta of allure that could make or break your social standing faster than you can say, bad hair day. Let's start with hair, because in medieval times it was more than just dead cells hanging off your scalp. It was a statement. Long, flowing locks were the ultimate sign of femininity and fertility, so naturally women took their hair care very seriously. But here's the twist. While long hair was all the rage, it was often hidden under elaborate headdresses. Talk about a paradox, right? You grow your hair out like Rapunzel, only to lock it away like a medieval secret. These headpieces were often adorned with precious stones and intricate embroidery, turning your head into a walking treasure chest. And these weren't your one-size-fits-all kind of accessories. A headdress could cost as much as an entire suit of armour, running you a good 200 shillings or more. Imagine paying that much for something that's essentially a decorative helmet. Now, as for makeup, we've already touched on the lead-based concoctions that would make any modern dermatologist cringe. But it wasn't just about achieving that ghostly glow. Rouge was also popular for adding a touch of colour to those pale cheeks, using ingredients like beet juice or crushed strawberries. It sounds almost quaint, until you remember that the same face might also be covered in lead and mercury. And let's not forget coal, used to define the eyes, because nothing says, "I'm ready for court," like a good smoky eye. The irony? While enhancing your features was the goal, makeup was applied with the intent to appear natural. It's like saying you woke up like this, except you spent an hour applying toxic substances. The real kicker in all of this is the societal expectation that women should appear effortlessly beautiful, yet modest. It was a tightrope walk between allure and chastity, where showing too much skin could brand you as scandalous. The very same society that praised ethereal beauty also preached modesty through layers upon layers of fabric. It's like being told to strut your stuff at a fashion show while wearing a nun's habit. Speaking of fabric, let's unravel the economic nightmare that was medieval fashion. Silk, brocade, and velvet weren't just fancy materials, they were status symbols. Owning a silk gown was like flaunting a designer label today, except buying one could set you back a small fortune, sometimes equivalent to a craftsman's annual wage. The textile trade boomed as a result, with merchants making a killing importing these luxury fabrics from the East. It was a buyer's market for those who could afford it, but a financial sinkhole for the aspirational middle class. So while you might have looked like $1,000,000, you were probably drowning in debt, praying that your silk didn't get stained at the next banquet. Let's not gloss over the paradox of medieval modesty. Women were expected to cover themselves almost entirely, yet fashion dictated that they should also appear alluring. It's like being caught between a rock and a hard place, except the rock is a moral code and the hard place is a corset. Clothing was designed to accentuate the waist and hips, sometimes using padded bum rolls or stiffened bodices, a trend that would send any modern comfort clothing enthusiast into a fit. The very act of dressing was a political statement, a way to navigate the treacherous waters of court life without capsizing your reputation. And let's talk about the burgeoning textile trade itself. By the 14th century, cities like Florence and Bruges became textile powerhouses, riding the wave of fashion demand. This wasn't just about pretty dresses, it was about economic dominance. The rise of these textile hubs was akin to the Silicon Valley of fashion. Everyone wanted a piece of the pie, from dyers to weavers to merchants. The trade routes for textiles were as complex as the garments themselves, stretching from the Silk Roads of Asia to the looms of Europe. It was a global enterprise before global enterprises were even a thing. Now, while these beauty and fashion standards might seem a world away, they were very much a part of the political and social fabric of the time. Marriages were arranged not just for love, or, more accurately, never for love, but for alliances, and looking the part was half the battle. A well-dressed daughter was a family's calling card, a way to attract suitors and secure favourable matches. Appearance was currency, and those who could afford to play the game often came out on top, or at least at the top of the feudal hierarchy. But here's the rub. All these efforts to conform to beauty standards were ultimately about maintaining control. The church, the nobility, and even the burgeoning merchant class all had a vested interest in keeping people preoccupied with their appearances. While you're busy perfecting your high forehead and investing in the latest imported fabric, you're less likely to question the status quo. It's a diversion tactic as old as time. Keep them focused on the superficial, and they'll overlook the strings pulling the puppet show. So, as you navigate this medieval maze of beauty, remember that every plucked hair and powdered cheek was a chapter in a larger story. The paradoxes of allure and modesty, the economic burdens of fashion, and the booming textile trade all served to reinforce a societal structure where appearance was intertwined with power. The stakes were high, the risks were real, and the payoff? Well, only if you played your cards, your cosmetics, just right. And on that note, hang tight, because there's more to explore in this medieval beauty saga. We've barely scratched the surface of the lengths people went to in their pursuit of the perfect look. From the societal pressures behind every fashion choice to the underlying power plays of the era, the story continues. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Before you think medieval beauty was just a ladies' game, let's shift our gaze to the men. While women were busy perfecting their ethereal looks, the guys weren't exactly lounging around in tunics and calling it a day. Nope, the standards for men were just as rigorous in their own rugged way. Welcome to the world of knights and chivalry, a place where your worth wasn't measured just by how many dragons you slayed, but also by how you carried yourself in the process. Knights were the rock stars of medieval society, the idealized figures straight out of a romantic ballad. But hold the lute music for a second. Being a knight wasn't all glamour and glory. The reality was a bit more, shall we say, gritty. If you were a knight, physical prowess was your calling card. Forget the six-pack abs. We're talking about the ability to swing a sword with enough force to make heads roll. Literally. Training started young, often around the age of 7, when boys were sent off as pages to learn the ropes. By their teens, they became squires, honing their skills in horsemanship, combat, and courtly manners. And if they were lucky and still standing, they'd be dubbed knights by their early 20s. In this world, a single suit of armour could cost as much as a small estate, around £40, which means only the well-heeled could afford to protect their, well, heels. But it wasn't just about wielding weapons. Knights had to look the part too. Enter the world of medieval grooming. Hair was a big deal. Literally, long, flowing locks were a sign of virility and nobility. But don't get too attached. They also wore chainmail coifs, which, if you've ever tried wearing metal on your head, isn't exactly gentle on the follicles. These knights weren't just slapping on a helmet and calling it a day. They had grooming tools that would make a modern barber proud. Think combs made of bone or wood, scissors and razors, because, yes, even medieval men had to deal with the 5 o'clock shadow. Facial hair was a matter of personal style and social signalling. While beards came in and out of fashion, the clean-shaven look often indicated youth and vigour, especially in battle. After all, who wants to get their beard caught in their own helm visor during a joust? The grooming process was a ritual in itself, a way to showcase attention to detail and personal discipline. And let's not forget the importance of hygiene, or the medieval attempt at it. Bathing wasn't a daily affair, but knights were known to take a dip before a big tournament or court event, using concoctions of herbs and oils to mask the less than savoury smells of the era. Now, while knights were busy keeping their hair and swords sharp, they also had to maintain a certain persona. Chivalry dictated that a knight be brave, loyal, and courteous, especially to noblewomen. It was the medieval version of having a good LinkedIn profile full of endorsements from lords and ladies. The chivalric code was both a moral guide and a PR campaign, ensuring that knights were seen as the epitome of manliness and virtue. But, like all good marketing, there was a gap between image and reality. The truth? Many knights were more interested in plunder than poetry, and more adept at swinging a sword than wooing a lady. And speaking of swinging swords, jousting tournaments were the medieval equivalent of a UFC fight meets a fashion show. These events were not just tests of skill, but also platforms for knights to strut their stuff in front of the who's who of feudal society. Picture it, banners fluttering, trumpets blaring, and horses galloping down a list. A wooden barrier separating two charging knights. The goal? Knock the other guy off his horse. The prize? Glory, bragging rights, and maybe a favour from a lady in the audience. But here's the kicker. Tournaments weren't just about brute strength. They were also fashion runways, where knights showcased the latest in armour design and heraldic bling. Armour was customised and engraved with family crests, turning each knight into a one-man parade of wealth and status. The cost of a full suit of armour could run up to £100. A small fortune back then. And if you think that's steep, consider this. The quality of your armour could mean the difference between life and death, making it the ultimate investment in personal safety and social standing. And then there were the hairstyles. Let's talk about the tonsure, a hairstyle that's as medieval as it gets. Picture a bald crown with a ring of hair. Think monk chic. While it was more common among clergy, the tonsure symbolized humility and devotion, making it a popular look for those who wanted to appear pious. Meanwhile, the nobility often favoured the page boy cut short, even, and easy to manage, but still stylish enough to show off under a feathered cap or a chainmail hood. Grooming and appearance were intertwined with the politics of the time. A well-groomed knight wasn't just a pretty face, he was a walking advertisement for his lord's power and influence. Looking good was part of the job, a way to project strength and competence. And in a world where alliances could shift as quickly as the wind, the right look could open doors or keep them securely shut. So, next time you think of medieval men as all brawn and no beauty, remember that their standards were as exacting as any. From their carefully crafted coifs to their gleaming armour, Knights embodied a standard of masculine beauty that demanded both physical and social prowess. They were the action heroes of their time, balancing the demands of battle with the expectations of courtly life. And while they might not have had the luxury of modern grooming products, they made do with what they had, proving that the pursuit of beauty and status is as timeless as the tales of their legendary exploits. And just like that, we're getting to the heart of how these medieval beauty standards for men and women alike weren't just about appearances. They were intricately tied to the social, political, and economic fabric of the time. Each plaited beard and polished breastplate told a story of ambition, survival, and the ever-present quest for power. But hang tight, because we're not done yet. There's plenty more to uncover in this labyrinthine world of medieval beauty and its oftentimes bizarre practices. Stay tuned, because the saga continues, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's next. And as we venture from the world of medieval beauty standards, it's hard not to draw some parallels between then and now. You'd think a few centuries and the invention of the selfie would change everything, right? Wrong. Turns out we're still dancing to a similar tune, albeit with a modern beat. Those medieval trends? They're the great-great-grandparents of today's beauty ideals, just dressed in different clothes. Let's start with the idea of beauty as power. Back then, a noblewoman's pale complexion wasn't just a fashion statement, it was a full-on social stratagem. Fast forward to today, and we see the same principle at play. Ever notice how certain looks can open doors in 2023? The beauty industry is worth a staggering $511 billion, driven by the unyielding idea that looking a certain way can change your life. It's the same beauty economy, just with less lead-based makeup and more Instagram filters. Speaking of filters, let's talk about the medieval equivalent, portraits. Yes, those glorified Instagram posts of yore. They were meticulously crafted to present an idealized version of the sitter. The aim? To convey wealth, status, and moral virtue. Today, we swipe through curated feeds that serve the same purpose. The more things change, the more they stay the same, right? While we now have Photoshop and Facetune, the art of presenting an idealized self to the world is as old as time. And then there's the whole beauty equals moralities myth that's been kicking around since the times of courtly love. The church preached that outer beauty reflected inner virtue, a notion that has somehow seeped into modern consciousness. Think about it. How often do we associate attractiveness with trustworthiness or intelligence? It's a stereotype that's stubbornly persistent, despite its medieval roots. The economic realities? Just as biting today as they were back then. Maintaining a fashionable appearance in medieval Europe could cost you your livelihood, and while we might not be shelling out a month's wages for a pot of ceruse anymore, the beauty stakes are still high. In the modern age, beauty regimes can cost upwards of $3,756 annually for the average woman, according to a 2021 study. That's a lot of cash for a bit of contour and mascara, mirroring the financial burden of medieval beauty practices. But why do these standards persist? In part because they're deeply woven into the fabric of societal control. Medieval beauty ideals were a means of preserving class structures and maintaining social order. Today, they often serve as a distraction, a way to keep us focused on surface-level concerns instead of deeper systemic issues. It's an age-old tactic, keep them concerned with their reflections, and they might overlook the strings pulling the puppet show. And let's not forget the role of storytelling in all this. Medieval literature, with its tales of fair maidens and gallant knights, reinforced beauty norms. Fast forward to our era, and Hollywood's doing much of the same, selling us stories where beauty often equates to happiness or success. We're still entranced by the fairy tale, still chasing that elusive, happily ever after that seems to hinge on physical perfection. So, what can we learn from all this? Well, understanding history gives us a toolkit for navigating today's beauty narratives with a sharper eye. By recognizing the echoes of the past in our present, we can challenge these enduring ideals and push for a broader, more inclusive definition of beauty. It's about time we took off the rose-tinted glasses and embraced a more authentic view of ourselves and others. The medieval pursuit of beauty was a high-stakes game, but it was also a reflection of the human desire for belonging and recognition. Today, we're still playing. But we have the advantage of hindsight. We can choose to redefine what's beautiful, focusing less on rigid standards and more on celebrating diversity. After all, true beauty isn't about fitting a mold, it's about breaking it. And there you have it, folks. The saga of medieval beauty standards might have been a tale of powders, potions, and paradoxes, but it's also a reminder of our shared human history. As we look in the mirror or the selfie camera, let's remember that beauty isn't just skin deep. It's a narrative shaped by culture, economics, and power. By understanding where we've been, we can better navigate where we're going, crafting a future where beauty is a choice, not a command. So keep questioning, keep learning, and most importantly, keep being your own kind of beautiful. Your eyelids part to the rhythmic hum of Tenochtitlan, a city that never whispers, only sings. The sun peeks in, casting slivers of light across your mat, while the air carries the scent of burning copal, that sweet resin you know so well. The city is already alive with the hustle and bustle of market chatter, the clang of metal, and the distant splash of paddles on Lake Texcoco. It's a new day in the heart of the Aztec Empire, and as a priest, you're not just a cog in the machine, you're the oil that keeps it running smooth, or at least tries to. Today, like every other day, starts with ritual. You roll out of your sleeping mat, shake off the dreams of feathered serpents and heavenly warfare, and take your first steps into a world where the divine is a daily grind. Your role as a priest isn't just about fancy garb and lofty ceremonies. It's a full-time job with a side of spiritual enlightenment. First up, the morning rituals at the Templo Mayor, the beating heart of Tenochtitlan's spiritual life. This grand pyramid is a testament to Aztec engineering, rising 60 meters into the sky with its twin temples dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, the sun and war god, and Tlaloc, the rain god. It's the place where gods meet mortals, and you're the intermediary, whether you like it or not. You're not alone in this sacred endeavor. The temple complex is a hive of activity, with fellow priests, acolytes, and temple staff buzzing around like bees in a hive. The morning is a time of preparation, and today's ceremonies are sure to draw a crowd. Sacrifices don't perform themselves, after all. The cost of maintaining this religious behemoth isn't just measured in maize and feathers. The economic implications are as complex as the city's intricate trade networks. The temple is a consumer of goods on a grand scale. It requires vast quantities of cacao, cotton, and jaguar pelts, to name just a few luxuries. And who do you think shoulders these costs? That's right, tribute from the far reaches of the empire. The distant provinces, from the coast of the Gulf to the valleys of Oaxaca, send their best to keep favor with the gods, and, by extension, the mighty Tenochtitlan. But let's not romanticize it too much. The reality is, running a temple is as much about bookkeeping as it is about divine duty. You might be surprised to know that priests are part-time accountants, keeping tabs on incoming goods, ensuring that every grain of corn and every bolt of cloth is accounted for. It's a job that requires a sharp mind and unwavering dedication, not to mention a stomach for the occasional human sacrifice. Sure, the myths love to paint a picture of priests as wise sages casting spells and communing with the gods, but the truth is, they're as likely to be found poring over tribute ledgers as they are leading chants. As you prepare for the day's events, you can't help but notice the sheer scale of Tenochtitlan's markets. The city is a commercial powerhouse, a fact that's easy to forget when you're knee-deep in divine duties. But without the bustling trade networks that connect Tenochtitlan to the rest of Mesoamerica, the temple's grandeur would crumble. The market is a cacophony of haggling voices and the aroma of spices and freshly cooked tamales. It's a reminder that while the gods may demand tribute, it's the people who provide it through their labors and their lives. And let's talk about those trade networks for a second. The Aztecs weren't just about war and sacrifice, they were shrewd traders too. The Pochteca, long-distance merchants, are the unsung heroes here. These guys travel hundreds of miles, risking life and limb to bring back the goods that keep the empire's wheels turning. From the jungles of the Maya lands, they haul cacao and quetzal feathers. From the north, turquoise and obsidian. It's like an ancient Amazon prime, minus the 2-day shipping, but with a significant increase in adventure and peril. So, as you stand on the temple steps, watch the people stream in and out of the city's bustling avenues, you realize that the temple is more than just a place of worship. It's a microcosm of the empire itself, a living testament to the complex web of economic, political, and spiritual threads that hold this civilization together. Sure, the gods are demanding and the rituals are elaborate, but it's the unseen structure beneath the tribute system the trade networks, the labor of countless hands that truly keeps the whole show running. And you, an Aztec priest, are right in the thick of it, balancing the scales between the divine and the day-to-day. As the sun climbs higher, casting its golden glow over the city, you prepare to face the day's challenges. The ceremonies will soon begin, and with them the timeless dance of power, piety, and politics that defines life in Tenochtitlan. As the sun blazes higher, bathing Tenochtitlan in its relentless glow, you find yourself at the nexus of power and devotion. This is the part of the day where the sacred meets the political, and boy, is it a tangled web. You see, being an Aztec priest isn't just about swinging incense and reciting chants. It's a full-blown game of 4D chess, where every move has ripple effects through the empire's intricate hierarchy. Let's plunge into the political maelstrom, shall we? Picture this. The Aztec Empire, a sprawling powerhouse in the 15th century, ruled not just by muscle, but by mind. Sure, the Tlatoani, the supreme ruler, sits at the top of the pyramid, figuratively and literally. But the priesthood? Oh, they're not just the supporting cast. They're the scriptwriters, directors, and sometimes the sneaky producers behind the scenes. The priesthood in Tenochtitlan held a unique position. They were the spiritual gatekeepers, but also the custodians of the empire's moral compass. And in a society where the gods had a say in everything from rain to warfare, that's a hefty responsibility. But don't get it twisted. This wasn't some altruistic endeavor. The priests had skin in the game, political skin to be exact. They were the ones who interpreted the will of the gods, and let's just say a well-timed prophecy or celestial sign could shift the balance of power quicker than you can say Huitzilopochtli. Now, let's debunk a little myth here. The idea of priests as mystical seers communing with the divine is all well and good, but the reality? It was more like a carefully orchestrated PR campaign. The priests were masters of spin long before social media was a twinkle in the 21st century's eye. They wielded their influence like a maestro wields a baton, directing the empire's symphony of power. And how did they maintain this influence? Through strategic alliances and a fair bit of diplomacy. Take, for instance, the relationship between the priesthood and the Tlatoani. It was a delicate dance, part support system, part power play. The ruler needed the priests to legitimize his reign, to assure the people that his rule was divinely sanctioned. In return, the priests needed the Tlatoani's backing to ensure their spiritual authority wasn't questioned. It's a classic case of, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, only with more feathered headdresses and less corporate jargon. And let's not forget the role of the Kalpuli, the neighborhood councils that managed local affairs. The priests worked closely with these groups, acting as mediators and advisors. It was a smart move, ensuring that power was decentralized enough to prevent rebellion, but centralized enough to maintain control. The priests were like the oil in the empire's political machine, making sure everything ran smoothly, or at least appeared to. But here's where it gets juicy. The priests were not above using a little divine intervention to sway political outcomes. A well-timed eclipse, or a strategically interpreted vision, could tip the scales in favor of one faction or another. And while the common folk might have believed in these celestial signs, the priests knew that sometimes the stars aligned not because of divine will, but because of a little creative interpretation. The Aztec priesthood was like a political Swiss army knife, versatile and indispensable. They were the empire's diplomats, forging alliances with neighboring states, smoothing over disputes, and ensuring that Tenochtitlan remained the center of the Mesoamerican universe. And let's be real, in a world where diplomacy often came with a side of human sacrifice, that was no small feat. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The priests constantly walked a tightrope, balancing their religious duties with political machinations. One wrong move, one misinterpreted omen, and the whole house of cards could come crashing down. It was a high-stakes game, and the priests played it with the finesse of seasoned gamblers. Now, before we get too carried away with the romance of it all, let's remember the harsh reality. The priests might have been the empire's power brokers, but they were also cogs in a much larger machine. Tenochtitlan was a city of 200,000 souls, each with their own needs and ambitions. Keeping the peace required more than divine favor. It required a keen understanding of human nature and the ability to navigate the murky waters of politics with a plume. So, as you stand on the temple steps, watching the city pulse with life, you understand the weight of your role. You're more than a spiritual guide. You're a linchpin in the empire's power structure. And while the myths might paint you as a mystic communing with the gods, the truth is far more complex and far more fascinating. The day is young, and the dance of power and piety is just beginning. There's a lot more to explore in this world of feathers, blood, and ambition, but that's a story for another day. As midday settles over Tenochtitlan, casting its brilliant light across the sprawling city, the rhythm of life shifts gears. It's a time when the city's social tapestry reveals itself in all its vibrant complexity, and as a priest, you're right in the thick of it, navigating the intricate relationships that define your role. You see, being a priest isn't just about swinging incense and reciting chants. It's about being a social chameleon, seamlessly moving between the common folk and the nobility with the grace of a jaguar on the prowl. Let's start with the common people. To them, you're more than just a figure in a fancy robe. You're a direct line to the divine. The average Aztec citizen, let's call them a macehuel, relies on priests not just for spiritual guidance, but also for practical matters. Need advice on the best time to plant your maize? The priest has got you covered. Want to ensure your newborn stays healthy? There's a ritual for that. It's a relationship built on mutual need, your divine insight for their earthly devotion. And let's be clear, this isn't some one-way street. The priests depend on the commoners too, for it's their tribute and labour that keep the temple fires burning and the ceremonial calendar ticking. Now, you might think that the priesthood's influence stops at the temple steps, but oh no, it extends far beyond. The priests act as community leaders, mediating disputes and ensuring that the social order remains intact. It's all about maintaining balance, like a cosmic seesaw where the stakes are as high as the pyramid steps. And while the common people may view you with a mix of awe and reverence, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There's a constant undercurrent of tension, a reminder that one misstep could lead to social unrest or, worse, divine disfavour. Then there's the nobility, the papilton, who are a whole different kettle of fish. They're the political elite, the movers and shakers of the Aztec world, and they know it. To them, you're less a spiritual guide and more an indispensable ally. The nobility understands the power of religion as a tool for control, and they wield it with the precision of a sculptor carving obsidian. The priesthood and the nobility, therefore, share a symbiotic relationship, each fortifying the other's position in the social hierarchy. But let's not romanticize it too much. The reality is that these relationships are fraught with power plays and subtle manipulations. The nobility might seek your blessing for their latest political maneuver, but they're also the first to question your loyalty if things don't go their way. It's a high-stakes game of chess, with the gods as the ultimate arbiters. And while you may walk the halls of power, rubbing shoulders with the elite, there's always a sense of fragility, like a delicate balance that could tip with the slightest breeze. Now, let's tackle the elephant in the room, human sacrifice. Ah, yes, the morbid fascination with the Aztecs' most infamous practice. The myths paint a picture of bloodthirsty priests gleefully offering human hearts to appease the gods, but the truth is far more nuanced and far more tragic. It's vital to understand that sacrifice wasn't just a religious duty, it was a societal necessity, a grim calculus designed to ensure cosmic order and agricultural fertility. The Aztecs believed that the universe was a delicate balance of forces, and human sacrifice was the ultimate offering to maintain that balance. Each sacrifice was a reenactment of the gods' own sacrifices, a way to repay the cosmic debt owed to the sun and the earth. And let's be honest, the stakes were high. In a world where a failed harvest could mean starvation for thousands, the pressure to ensure divine favour was immense. But how did the priests justify such a brutal practice? Well, for starters, they believed it was their sacred duty, ordained by the gods themselves. The victims, often prisoners of war, were seen as emissaries to the divine realm, their sacrifice a noble contribution to the greater good. It's a harsh reality, but one that made sense in a world where the line between life and death was razor thin. And here's the kicker. The societal pressure to perform these rituals was immense. The priests were not just spiritual leaders, they were guardians of the cosmic order, the keepers of a fragile peace that hung by a thread. The fear of divine wrath was a powerful motivator, and the priests wielded it with both caution and conviction. In a society that valued honor and duty above all, the willingness to die for the gods was seen as the ultimate act of devotion. But let's debunk another myth while we're at it. The idea that Aztec society was uniformly enthusiastic about these sacrifices is a bit of a stretch. Sure, the rituals were steeped in religious fervor, but there was also a sense of dread, a recognition of the human cost involved. The priests, for all their power and influence, were acutely aware of the weight of their actions, the burden of balancing the scales between divine will and human life. So, as you stand in the temple courtyard, watching the midday sun cast its long shadows, you're reminded of the complexities of your role. You're a mediator, a bridge between the earthly and the divine, a figure caught in the crossfire of social expectations and cosmic demands. It's a life of constant negotiation, where every decision is a delicate dance between duty and morality. As the day unfolds, you prepare for the next round of ceremonies, your mind a whirlwind of thoughts and responsibilities. The myths may paint you as a mystical figure, a master of rituals and omens, but the truth is far more intricate. You're a linchpin in a vast network of social, political, and spiritual forces, each pulling you in a different direction. And while the myths offer a romanticized view of your world, the reality is a rich tapestry of ambition, devotion, and sacrifice. The sun begins its descent, casting a warm glow over Tenochtitlan, and you feel the weight of your role more acutely than ever. There's much more to explore in this world of feathers, blood, and ambition, and as the afternoon fades into evening, you brace yourself for the next chapter in this grand Aztec saga. Rest assured, there's plenty of intrigue and complexity left to uncover, but that's a story for another time. As the sun dips toward the horizon, painting Tenochtitlan in shades of gold and shadow, you find yourself at the precipice of another crucial aspect of your priestly duties, the guardianship of knowledge. In a civilization where oral tradition and written codices are the twin pillars of education, the afternoon is your time to nurture the intellectual lifeblood of the empire. Yes, you're part priest, part philosopher, and part keeper of the Aztec equivalent of the Library of Congress. Minus the air conditioning, of course. Let's get one thing straight. The Aztecs weren't just about pyramids and sacrifices. They were intellectual heavyweights, and the priesthood was their Ivy League. You and your fellow priests are custodians of an extensive library of codices. These are not your average bedtime stories. We're talking about books made of bark paper or deerskin, intricately painted with colourful glyphs and symbols that record everything from historical events to astronomical data. It's like having Wikipedia, but in a form that could double as a piece of art on your living room wall. These codices are crucial. They preserve the wisdom of generations, including essential agricultural knowledge, historical records, and religious lore. But here's the kicker. Only a select few can read them. And guess who's on that list? That's right, you, esteemed priest, along with the nobility. This exclusivity amplifies your role as a gatekeeper of knowledge, and in a society where information is power, you're practically holding the keys to the kingdom. Now, let's talk about oral tradition. In a world where the written word is precious and rare, storytelling is the lifeline of cultural continuity. The priests are the master narrators, weaving tales of gods and heroes, of creation and destruction. It's not just about spinning a good yarn, though. These stories are teaching tools, moral compasses, and historical records rolled into one. Your words are the threads that bind the past to the present, ensuring that the wisdom of the ancients isn't lost to the mists of time. Sounds romantic, right? But let's not get carried away. The reality is that preserving this knowledge isn't all sunshine and rainbows. The codices are fragile, vulnerable to the ravages of time, fire, and water. Not to mention the looming threat of a certain group of Spaniards who are about to crash this party with all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. You see, the Spaniards have a knack for burning things they don't understand, and that includes your precious codices. Talk about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The Spanish conquest is a spectre hanging over Tenochtitlan, a whispered fear that grows louder with each passing day. Maintaining libraries and educating future generations feels like building sandcastles against an incoming tide. The challenge is immense, but so is the resolve. You know that the survival of your culture's intellectual heritage depends on your ability to adapt and persevere. It's a race against time, with the clock ticking louder than the beating of the ceremonial drums. But let's not forget the practical challenges of educating the next generation. The Aztec educational system is no walk in the park. It's a rigorous affair, with separate schools for the nobility and commoners. The Calmacac is where the sons of the elite learn the art of governance, warfare, and religion. Meanwhile, the Telpotkali educates the common folk, focusing on practical skills and military training. It's a system designed to perpetuate the social order, ensuring that everyone knows their place in the cosmic and earthly hierarchy. As a priest, you're deeply involved in this educational process. You're a mentor, a disciplinarian, and a role model. Your task is to instill not just knowledge, but also the values of duty, honor, and respect for tradition. It's a heavy burden, but one you carry with the pride of a jaguar prowling the jungle. After all, these students are the future leaders, warriors, and priests of the empire, and their education is the cornerstone of Tenochtitlan's stability. Yet, the shadow of the conquistadors looms large, threatening to upend centuries of tradition and learning. It's not just about preserving knowledge, it's about ensuring that this knowledge can withstand the cultural tsunami that's about to hit. The priests are the bastion against this onslaught, standing firm in the face of potential oblivion. It's a tale as old as time, the struggle to preserve what is sacred in a world that is constantly changing. So, as you sit amidst the scrolls and symbols, the weight of history on your shoulders, you can't help but reflect on the enormity of your task. You're not just preserving the past, you're safeguarding the future. And while the myths might paint a picture of priests as mystical guardians of arcane secrets, the reality is far more challenging and far more compelling. It's a battle fought not with swords and shields, but with words and wisdom, and the stakes are nothing less than the soul of a civilization. As the afternoon stretches into evening, the air around you thick with the scent of burning copal and the murmur of ancient chants, you prepare to continue this intellectual odyssey. The sun may set on Tenochtitlan, but the flame of knowledge must never be allowed to dim. With every word you speak and every glyph you decipher, you're adding another thread to the tapestry of history, ensuring that the story of the Aztecs will endure. There's much more to explore in this world of intellect and intrigue, but that's a tale for another time. As twilight drapes Tenochtitlan in its dusky cloak, the city seems to exhale, a collective sigh that marks the end of another day in this vibrant metropolis. The marketplace quiets, the clamour of trade replaced by the softer sounds of families gathering. And you, an Aztec priest, step back from the intellectual whirlwind of codices and oral traditions, reflecting on the day's efforts to preserve the empire's rich tapestry of knowledge. Let's face it, though, the Aztec world, as grand as it is, stands on the precipice of monumental change. The legacy you and your fellow priests strive to protect is about to face its greatest test. With the Spanish expedition led by Hernán Cortés on the horizon, the days of this magnificent civilization are numbered. Cortés, that audacious conquistador, arrived in 1519, and within 2 years everything would change. By 1521, Tenochtitlan would fall, a casualty of warfare, disease, and betrayal. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? The thought that this world, so painstakingly built, could unravel so swiftly. The Spanish conquest is the stuff of legends and nightmares, romanticized tales of brave explorers and tragic emperors. But the reality? A brutal collision of worlds where smallpox and steel did more than swords and strategy ever could. The Aztecs, with their impressive city planning and sophisticated society, were no match for European diseases. Smallpox alone decimated the population, reducing the empire's ability to resist. It's estimated that over 40% of the indigenous population succumbed to disease brought by the Spaniards. Talk about an unwelcome gift. Yet, here we are in the modern era, still enthralled by the Aztecs. Why do their stories endure? Perhaps it's because they remind us of the duality of human nature, the capacity for both awe-inspiring creativity and harrowing destruction. The myths, the grandeur of Tenochtitlan, the rituals, and the art. They paint a picture of a society that was as complex as it was enigmatic. The Aztecs were architects of not only stone and mortar, but of a way of life that wove the sacred and the mundane into a seamless whole. Consider the allure of the Aztec calendar, for instance. This wasn't just a way to mark time. The Tonopohualli, their sacred 260-day calendar, was a cosmic blueprint, a pattern of days that guided everything from ceremonies to agriculture. It's a testament to their sophisticated understanding of astronomy and the cycles of nature. Yet, while we marvel at their celestial charts, we must also confront the darker side of their cosmology, the sacrifices that ensured the sun would rise again. It's a harsh juxtaposition, reminding us that greatness often walks hand in hand with grim realities. And what about the infamous Aztec gold? The myths of treasure troves hidden beneath the city, driven by tales of wealth that lured European explorers across the ocean. In truth, the Aztecs valued jade and quetzal feathers far more than gold, which they considered less precious. But the legend of Aztec gold endures, a testament to our own obsession with wealth and the lengths we'll go to obtain it. It's a narrative that reflects not just on the Aztecs, but on ourselves. Our insatiable hunger for the material masked as the quest for adventure. The stories of the Aztec gods also captivate us. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, and Huitzilopochtli, the warrior sun. They're larger-than-life figures that fuel our imaginations, embodying themes of creation and destruction, life and death, in a cosmic cycle that speaks to the human condition. Their myths are mirrors, reflecting our own fears and aspirations, our struggles for understanding and control in a world that often feels chaotic. Yet, as we romanticize these stories, it's crucial to remember the reality behind the myth. The Aztec world was a place where power was maintained through a delicate balance of diplomacy and force, where the priesthood held sway not just over the spiritual, but the political, and where the everyday lives of people were shaped by these forces. It's a reminder that history is not just a series of grand events, but a tapestry woven from the lives of countless individuals. In the end, the legacy of the Aztecs is not just in their monuments or their myths, but in the resilience of their descendants. Despite the cataclysmic changes of the 16th century, the cultural threads of the Aztecs, seen in language, tradition, and art, continue to endure. Mexico City, standing over the ruins of Tenochtitlan, is a living testament to this resilience, a modern metropolis that carries the echoes of its ancient past. So, as the day draws to a close and the stars emerge above Tenochtitlan, you take a moment to reflect on the intricate dance of history, myth, and memory. The Aztecs remind us that the past is never truly gone. It lives on in the stories we tell and the lessons we learn, and while the myths may offer a romanticized view of a lost world, the reality is a far richer and more complex narrative, one that continues to shape our understanding of ourselves and our place in the cosmos. The sun may set, but the story of the Aztecs endures, a testament to the enduring power of human creativity, resilience, and the eternal quest for meaning. In the bustling heart of ancient Egypt, where the Nile's whispers could almost drown out the human hustle, the gods and goddesses were the ultimate celebrities. Forget about the Kardashians. These divine beings had followers long before Instagram likes were even a twinkle in humanity's eye. Ancient Egyptians didn't just worship these deities. They lived in a spiritual soap opera starring an entire pantheon with plot twists worthy of a binge-watch session. First up, we have Ra, the sun god, the big boss of the Egyptian hierarchy. With his daily journey across the sky, Ra was essentially the original solar panel, providing light and life, but also a touch of fiery temper. And if you think sibling rivalry is bad now, wait until you hear about the daily squabbles of Ra's brood. Ra had a bit of a habit of getting into tiffs with Apep, a colossal serpent who really had a thing for plunging the world into chaos. Picture a snake trying to eclipse the sun every night. Talk about a high-stakes game of cosmic hide-and-seek. Then there's Osiris, who might just win the award for the most dramatic Afterlife saga. Osiris, the god of the afterlife, resurrection, and regeneration, was doing quite well until his brother Set decided to go full-on villain mode. Set, the god of chaos, storms, and disorder, wasn't exactly the family favourite after he dismembered Osiris. But here's the kicker. Osiris's wife Isis was not about to let a thing like death get in the way. With a little necromantic magic, she pieces him back together, minus a part or two, and voila, Osiris becomes the first mummy. And you thought your family gatherings were intense. Speaking of Isis, she is the goddess of magic and motherhood, and her powers were so renowned that her name has echoed through the ages. Isis wasn't just known for her necromancy, she was also a bit of an ancient world celebrity, with temples dedicated to her across the Mediterranean. Her magical prowess was said to be so formidable that even Ra himself wasn't immune to her charms. In a classic tale of girl power, she tricked Ra into revealing his secret name, essentially gaining the keys to his divine kingdom. Now, let's not forget Horus, the falcon-headed god of the sky, war, and hunting. Horus, son of Isis and Osiris, was basically the Egyptian version of an avian superhero. With a keen eye and a warrior's heart, he took on Set in an epic battle to avenge dear old dad Osiris. This celestial feud lasted for 80 years, a time frame that makes Game of Thrones look like a sitcom in comparison. Horus's victory wasn't just a family win, it was a cosmic shift that underscored the eternal battle between order and chaos. And in the corner of creation and wisdom, we have Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe of the gods. Thoth was the go-to guy for all things intellectual. Need to write a spell? Thoth's your bird. Trying to calculate the odds of a successful harvest? He's got you covered. Thoth was credited with inventing writing, which is a pretty big deal considering the Egyptian obsession with recording everything from grand battles to the amount of grain in the royal pantry. Of course, the Egyptian pantheon wouldn't be complete without Bastet, the feline goddess of home, fertility, and, well, cats. Bastet was adored in ancient Egypt, a nation obsessed with cats long before the internet made them stars. Her devotees believed she could ward off evil spirits and disease, a role she seemed to relish with the kind of poise only a cat could muster. But let's not sugarcoat it. This divine world wasn't all sunshine and papyrus scrolls. The gods and goddesses had their quirks, and their divine family tree was more tangled than a ball of yarn in a kitten's paws. Marriages, affairs, and power struggles were as much a part of their world as divine interventions. They were, after all, reflections of the human condition, elevated to cosmic proportions. The allure of these gods wasn't just in their power or their personalities. It was in the promise they represented. They were the answers to the mysteries of life and death, the arbiters of fate, and the ultimate safety nets in a world where the Nile could flood one day and drought the next. In a land where the horizons seemed to stretch into eternity, the Egyptians looked to their gods to explain the inexplicable and to maintain the balance of Ma'at, the concept of truth, balance, and cosmic order. So, as the sands of time flow and the pyramids stand as silent witnesses, the gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt continue to captivate us. They remind us that even in a world vastly different from our own, the pursuit of understanding and the thirst for stories remain timeless. And whether it's a falcon-headed hero or a crafty goddess, these ancient figures still have the power to make us pause, laugh, and perhaps see a bit of ourselves in their divine antics. And speaking of timeless stories, let's dive into the mystical world of ancient Egyptian spellbooks, where a little hieroglyphic hocus-pocus was all the rage. Forget Hogwarts. The Egyptians had magical practices that would make even the most seasoned wizard do a double take. We're talking spells and potions that could supposedly turn your love life around faster than a swipe right on Tinder, or ensure that your enemies had a very bad day every day. First, let's crack open those hieroglyphic spellbooks, which were essentially the ancient equivalent of a DIY magic kit. These texts were meticulously penned by scribes who, like modern-day influencers, knew the power of a well-crafted message. These scribes etched incantations onto papyrus sheets, amulets, and even tomb walls, ensuring the magic was both portable and permanent. The texts, often called Books of the Dead, were a bit like a magical Swiss Army knife, offering spells for everything from safe passage in the afterlife to more mundane concerns like making sure your neighbour's donkey stopped braying at dawn. Now, let's talk about love potions, because who doesn't want a little help in the romance department? The ancient Egyptians had a spell for that, a concoction that included ingredients like crushed beetles, honey, and, wait for it, crocodile dung. Yep, love was literally a wild ride, and while it seems bizarre to us now, these potions were serious business back then. They were crafted with the belief that such mixtures could influence the heart and mind of the desired partner, making them fall hopelessly in love. Modern dating apps might save time, but they certainly lack the, shall we say, organic touch of Egyptian love spells. Speaking of organic, let's not skip over the curses, which were as popular as they were potent. Ancient Egyptians had a knack for ensuring grudges lived on in infamy. The idea was simple. If someone wronged you, you could inscribe a curse on a clay tablet, offering a one-way ticket to misery for your nemesis. These curses were buried or placed in tombs, intended to unleash divine wrath upon the offender. And while it sounds like a plot straight out of a horror movie, the reality was that these rituals were steeped in the belief that cosmic justice was just a spell away. But before you get too bewitched by the romance of Egyptian magic, let's talk costs, both literal and figurative. Crafting these spells wasn't cheap. Papyrus was a luxury item, and hiring a scribe to pen your incantation was like commissioning a bespoke suit today. A single sheet of papyrus could cost as much as a month's wages for the average worker. And the ingredients? Let's just say they weren't exactly available at the local bazaar. This meant that magic was often a privilege of the wealthy, those who could afford to hedge their bets with the gods. On a broader scale, these mystical practices reflected the social and political landscapes of ancient Egypt. Magic wasn't just about personal gain, it was a tool for maintaining order and asserting power. Pharaohs employed magicians as part of their court, using spells to legitimize their rule and protect their kingdom. Imagine a political campaign where the promises weren't just for roads and schools, but also for ensuring the Nile flooded just right. Of course, the appeal of these practices goes beyond their historical context. They offer us a glimpse into the universal human desire for control over the uncontrollable. Whether it was love, health, or vengeance, magic provided a sense of agency in a world where fate felt as unpredictable as a desert storm. Even today, the idea of a quick fix or a guaranteed outcome is alluring, though we now lean more towards self-help books than spell books. Yet, as much as we debunk the romantic narratives, there's no denying the allure of Egyptian mysticism. It's a testament to the human spirit, always searching for answers, always hoping for a touch of the miraculous. These spells and rituals, while steeped in the sands of time, remind us that the quest for love, justice, and power is as old as civilization itself. So, as we close this chapter of hieroglyphic enchantments and mystical endeavors, keep in mind that the magic of ancient Egypt was as much about the people who practiced it as it was about the spells themselves. It was a tapestry woven with the threads of belief, desire, and ritual, a complex dance between the seen and the unseen, the known and the unknowable. And while the specifics of these practices may be lost to history, their spirit continues to captivate our imaginations, echoing through the corridors of time like a whisper from a distant past. Stay tuned as we continue this journey into the mystical underbelly of ancient Egypt, where the magic isn't just in the spells, but in the stories they tell and the mysteries they still hold. As we delve deeper into the labyrinthine corridors of ancient Egyptian beliefs, it becomes clear that the afterlife wasn't just an ethereal dream, it was a full-fledged industry. Think of it as the ultimate destination wedding, but with the Nile as your backdrop and a guest list that included the gods themselves. And just like any swanky event, this eternal after-party came with a price tag that could make even Jeff Bezos pause for thought. Let's start with the basics, the tomb. Not merely a resting place, but a veritable home for eternity, complete with all the mod cons an immortal could desire. The Egyptians didn't just build tombs, they curated them. These were bespoke affairs, designed to ensure the deceased had everything they needed for a comfortable afterlife. And by everything, we mean everything, from food and furniture to servants. These items were often depicted in paintings or included as miniature models, ensuring the dead wouldn't have to lift a finger. But here's the kicker, even in death, the rich had it way better. Your basic tomb, let's call it the economy package, might just include a painted sarcophagus and a few modest offerings. But if you were an elite, say a pharaoh or high priest, your eternal abode was more akin to a luxury suite at the Ritz. Consider the Great Pyramid of Giza, built for Pharaoh Khufu. This limestone behemoth required around 2.3 million blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons. Talk about a weighty mortgage, and the costs astronomical. A simple burial could easily cost a year's salary for a worker, while a top-tier tomb could run into the modern equivalent of millions. No wonder the Egyptians believed in being buried with their wealth. Who wouldn't want to hold on to that kind of investment indefinitely? But let's not forget the other major players, the priests. These guys were the event planners of the dead, orchestrating the elaborate rituals needed to ensure safe passage to the afterlife. They were like the wedding coordinators, personal trainers, and financial advisors rolled into one. In Egypt, a good priest was worth his weight in gold, literally. They were responsible for performing the rites that activated the magical properties of the tomb's contents, a process that was as intricate as it was essential. The Book of the Dead, a misnomer for what was actually a collection of spells, was a must-have accessory. Think of it as the Lonely Planet Guide to the Afterlife, complete with advice on how to navigate the perilous journey through the underworld. However, these spells were not one-size-fits-all. They were tailored to the individual, a personalized script for the great beyond. The cost of commissioning such a tome? Easily equivalent to a new car today if you were aiming for the deluxe edition with all the bells and whistles. Now, while we're debunking myths, let's tackle the notion that everyone in ancient Egypt got the same treatment in death. Spoiler alert, they didn't. The grandeur of one's tomb and the complexity of the funerary rites were directly proportional to their wealth and status in life. The rich had elaborate mummifications, their organs carefully preserved in canopic jars, while the poor were often left with a simple burial in the sand, left to dry out in the desert heat. It was a stark reminder that even in the afterlife, the socio-economic divide persisted. And yet, the allure of these practices is undeniable. They speak to a universal human desire to transcend mortality, to ensure that some part of us endures beyond the grave. The Egyptians believed that by preparing meticulously for the afterlife, they could achieve a form of immortality, a promise that resonated deeply in a society where life could be as fleeting as the annual Nile flood. But why was this concept so economically ingrained? The answer lies in the intersection of religion and politics. Pharaohs used grand tomb constructions as a means of asserting power, demonstrating divine favor, and ensuring their legacy. These monumental projects employed thousands, keeping the economy humming and reinforcing the social order. It was a sort of ancient job creation scheme that conveniently doubled as a divine PR campaign. In this way, the economics of the afterlife were not just about personal salvation, but about maintaining the status quo. The wealthier you were, the more you could invest in your eternal future, and the greater your influence in the land of the living. It's a system that echoes modern society more than we might care to admit, where money can often buy not only comfort, but also a measure of immortality. So as we navigate the corridors of these ancient tombs, we find ourselves not just uncovering artifacts, but unearthing the complexities of human nature itself. The drive to secure a place in the afterlife was as much about spiritual fulfillment as it was about social strategy, a dance between faith and finance that continues to intrigue us today. As we continue our journey through the mysticism and economics of ancient Egypt, remember that the stories these practices tell are as much about the living as they are about the dead. They reveal a civilization deeply invested in the idea of balance, between chaos and order, life and death, wealth and poverty. And while the specifics may have changed, the underlying quest for meaning and legacy remains as timeless as the pyramids themselves. Stay tuned as we further unravel the intricate tapestry of ancient Egyptian beliefs, where every twist and turn offers new insights into the world of the pharaohs and their celestial ambitions. As the curtain rises on the next act of our mystical Egyptian drama, let's shift our spotlight onto the puppeteers behind the divine scenes, the priests and priestesses, the original power brokers who occupied a space somewhere between a spiritual guru and a political heavyweight. These were the folks who managed to keep the god's mystique alive while making sure they held the real reins of power in the land of the pyramids. First, let's talk about these priests, who were anything but the humble servants of the divine you might imagine. In fact, they were more akin to CEOs of a religious conglomerate, managing vast resources and wielding influence that would make any modern-day politician green with envy. The temple complexes they managed weren't just places for quiet reflection. They were the Wall Streets of ancient Egypt. Temples owned land, lent money, and even ran farming operations, with some like Karnak employing thousands of workers. Imagine the Vatican with a side hustle in agriculture and finance, and you're starting to get the picture. The high priest of Amun at Karnak, for example, was a position not to be sneezed at. By the New Kingdom period, this role was so influential that the holder was essentially the second most powerful person in Egypt, right after the pharaoh. The high priest had his fingers in every pie, from state ceremonies to economic decisions. It was a gig that came with perks aplenty, from lavish residences to a wardrobe that would make a Kardashian blush. But let's not kid ourselves. this wasn't just about preaching and praying. These priests were savvy operators who understood the power of branding long before the term existed. They kept the allure of the gods alive with elaborate rituals, using incense, music, and dramatic storytelling to engage the masses. Think of them as the original content creators, crafting narratives that kept the public and the pharaoh himself hooked on divine favor. Now, where there's power, there's often a bit of intrigue, and the Egyptian priesthood was no exception. These guys were experts in political maneuvering, often playing a game of thrones that would make Westeros seem like a playground scuffle. During times of weak pharaohs, they expanded their power and influence, sometimes even calling the shots from behind the scenes. The priests of Amun, for instance, were so powerful at one point that they controlled more land than the pharaoh himself, a fact that probably didn't sit well with the royal ego. And let's not overlook the priestesses, who played a role that was both mystical and political. The most famous of these was the god's wife of Amun, a position that didn't just have a delightful ring to it but also came with significant clout. This role was often filled by royal women, giving them a platform of influence in a society where men typically held the reins. The god's wife managed temple rituals and possessions, wielding power that was both spiritual and economic. It's like being a first lady with a direct line to the divine. These priestesses didn't just sit pretty in their temples, they were active participants in the religious and political spheres. They performed rituals that were believed to maintain Ma'at, the divine order, which was no small feat. In a world where the balance between chaos and order was as fragile as a papyrus scroll, the priestesses were the keepers of the cosmic peace. Now, let's debunk a little myth, the notion that the priesthood was a purely spiritual endeavor. While they were the custodians of religious knowledge, they were also deeply entrenched in the political and economic machinery of ancient Egypt. Their influence extended far beyond the temple walls, permeating every aspect of Egyptian life, from the court to the fields. The economic clout of the temples cannot be overstated. They were exempt from taxes, which only added to their wealth and influence. It's like they had a lifetime subscription to the best tax shelter known to ancient man. This financial power allowed them to fund massive construction projects, commission vast quantities of art, and maintain a workforce that rivaled any royal enterprise. In a world without stock markets, temples were the ultimate investment portfolios, holding wealth that could sway the fortunes of the nation. And here's where the plot thickens. The priesthood wasn't just about serving the gods, but also about serving themselves. Promotions within the temple hierarchy were often based on connections and wealth rather than piety. It was as much about who you knew as what you knew. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? The priests were the ultimate networkers, adept at playing the long game in a society where dynasties could rise and fall like the waters of the Nile. But why did this matter? Because the priests and priestesses were the glue that held the society together. They were the intermediaries between the mortal and the divine, the ones who kept the cosmic scales balanced. In a land where the gods were believed to be as real as the pharaoh himself, the priesthood's role was fundamental to maintaining the social order. Without them, the whole system might have crumbled like a poorly built pyramid. Despite their undeniable influence, the priesthood wasn't immune to changes in the political tide. During periods of upheaval, such as the Amarna period, when Pharaoh Akhenaten attempted to upend the traditional religious order, the priests found themselves in a precarious position. Akhenaten's attempt to shift worship to the god Aten sidelined the powerful Amun priesthood, showing that even the mightiest could be brought low by a determined ruler. But like any resilient institution, the priesthood adapted, biding their time until the old order was restored, a testament to their enduring influence and adaptability. In the grand tapestry of ancient Egypt, the priesthood was a thread that ran through every aspect of life, weaving together the spiritual, political, and economic strands of society. Their legacy is a reminder that power comes in many forms, and those who understand how to wield it can shape the destinies of nations and gods alike. So, as we step back from the incense-filled halls of the temples, let's carry forward the understanding that the mystics of Egypt were as much about earthly power as they were about divine mysteries. The story of the priests and priestesses is far from over, and as we continue our exploration of ancient Egypt's mystical practices, we'll uncover more about how these enigmatic figures shaped the world around them. Stay tuned, as the sands of time have many more secrets to reveal, and we're just getting started on this journey through history's most intriguing civilization. As we wrap up our journey into the mystical practices of ancient Egypt, it's time to tackle the elephant, or perhaps the Sphinx in the room. What has Hollywood gotten wrong about ancient Egypt? And boy, is there a list. Let's separate the sand from the substance and see how the myths stack up against reality. First up, let's talk pyramids. If you've watched any film set in ancient Egypt, you'd think slaves built these limestone marvels under the whip, sweat glistening in the relentless desert sun. But the reality is more nuanced. The pyramids were indeed monumental projects, but they were not the result of slave labor. Recent archaeological evidence suggests that the builders were skilled workers, organized into a sophisticated labor force that was well fed and housed. They even had healthcare benefits. Ancient style. The workers' village near the pyramids of Giza reveals barracks-like accommodations and bakeries that churned out bread faster than a modern food truck. So, while the idea of a slave-driven workforce makes for dramatic storytelling, it doesn't quite hold up against the hard evidence. Now, let's jump to Cleopatra, the ultimate historical diva, often portrayed as a seductress wielding her beauty like a weapon. Hollywood likes to imagine her as a femme fatale with a penchant for kohl eyeliner and Roman lovers. However, Cleopatra was no mere beauty queen. She was a cunning political strategist who spoke 9 languages and held the reins of power in a turbulent era. Sure, her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony have been romanticized ad nauseum, but they were also shrewd political alliances. Cleopatra's real allure lay in her intellect and ability to navigate the treacherous waters of Roman politics, not just in her supposed charm. Then there's the ever-popular trope of the curse of the mummy. The idea that opening a tomb will unleash ancient wrath is the stuff of horror flicks and campfire tales. The reality? Ancient Egyptians did indeed inscribe warnings on tombs, but the so-called curses were more about deterring grave robbers than unleashing supernatural horror. The notion of a mummy's curse gained traction in the early 20th century when a series of deaths and misfortunes befell those who had entered King Tutankhamun's tomb. The press, smelling a good story, ran with it, and a legend was born. In truth, the curse was likely due more to mold, spores, and bacteria than any divine retribution. Now, we've all seen depictions of pharaohs and priests in elaborate rituals, conjuring magic and communing with the gods. While Egyptian religion was indeed rich with ritual, Hollywood tends to overlook the economic and political machinery behind these spectacles. Temples were economic powerhouses, and rituals often served state propaganda as much as they did spiritual needs. The priests weren't just mystical figureheads, they were political players, managing vast lands and resources. So, while the image of a lone priest chanting under the moonlight is compelling, the reality was more akin to a boardroom meeting with spiritual overtones. And what about the grand illusion of the afterlife? The idea that every Egyptian was mummified and buried with gold treasures is a bit of a stretch. Sure, the elite enjoyed lavish burials, but the average Egyptian's journey to the afterlife was more modest. Many were buried in simple graves, with few possessions to accompany them. The grand tombs of the pharaohs and high priests were the exception, not the rule. Yet, the allure of golden treasures and magnificent tombs persists, largely because it reflects our own desires for wealth and immortality. Speaking of immortality, let's not forget the eternal allure of Egyptian mysticism. It's easy to see why Hollywood loves to play up the magical aspect of ancient Egypt. Spells and potions, curses and blessings, they're the stuff of legend. But these practices were more than just hocus-pocus. They were deeply entwined with the Egyptians' understanding of the universe. Magic was a tool for maintaining Ma'at, the cosmic order, and it was practiced alongside medicine and science. The Egyptians didn't see magic as supernatural. It was a natural extension of their reality, a way to exert control in a world full of uncertainties. So why do these myths persist? Partly because they're irresistible. They tap into our love for drama, mystery, and the supernatural. But there's also a deeper reason. These myths reflect our own hopes and fears. The idea of a curse, for instance, speaks to our fear of the unknown, while tales of mummified pharaohs evoke our desire for eternal life. In a way, these stories tell us more about ourselves than they do about ancient Egypt. As we take a step back from the mythical sands of Egypt, it's clear that the real story is just as fascinating as the fiction, if not more so. The Egyptians were masters of balance, of weaving together the spiritual and the practical, the mystical and the mundane. Their civilization was a testament to human ingenuity and the eternal quest for understanding. In the end, the legacy of ancient Egypt is not just in its monuments or its myths, but in its enduring influence on how we think about power, spirituality, and the human condition. The stories we tell about Egypt's past are a reflection of our present, a mirror held up to our own beliefs and desires. As we put the last hieroglyph on this chapter, remember that the real magic of Egypt lies not in curses or mummies, but in the timeless human spirit that sought to make sense of the cosmos and carve a legacy in stone. And so, as the Nile continues its eternal flow and the pyramids stand sentinel over the desert sands, we bid farewell to the land of the pharaohs, not as a distant relic of the past, but as a living tapestry of history that continues to shape our world. Until next time, may your dreams be filled with the wonders and wisdom of ancient Egypt. As dawn's first light seeps through the gaps in your humble wooden shutters, you're jolted awake not by the heroic call to battle, but by the far less glamorous bleating of a goat. Welcome to 12th century BC, Anatolia, where the real Trojan story isn't scribbled on parchment by poets but etched in the dirt by the likes of you, a farmer feeding the city that launched 1,000 ships. Forget Helen's face. Today, it's all about the gritty reality of barley, wheat, and the occasional ornery goat. You roll out of your straw-stuffed mattress. Because, let's be honest, the luxury of a feather bed is reserved for the upper echelons of Troy, not us ground-level grain growers. You've got a full day ahead, and it starts long before the sun has truly settled into the sky. No lazy heroics here. This is the real deal. You need to get those seeds in the ground, and the morning dew is your ally, keeping the soil just damp enough to coax those stubborn grains into life. Now, while the legends are all about the clash of swords and the glory of war, here's the unvarnished truth. Without your hard work, Troy's legendary warriors wouldn't have the energy to swing their swords. The city's economy, for all its bronze-clad bravado, relies heavily on the likes of you. Your barley and wheat are the backbone of the diet. Bread and beer, my friend. That's the sustenance of the Trojan populace, not some mythical ambrosia. In fact, a typical Trojan citizen would likely consume around 1-2 pounds of bread daily, and let me tell you, that adds up fast when the city's bustling population is estimated at several thousand. You step outside, squinting at the horizon that promises another day of back-breaking labour. But hey, at least you're not alone. The fields stretch out before you, shared with your fellow farmers, each tending their own patch of life-sustaining earth. You exchange nods and grunts. Who has time for a full conversation when there's planting to be done? The fields are a patchwork quilt of effort, each strip of land a testament to the shared duty of feeding a city bracing itself for war. Now, let's talk farming techniques because, believe it or not, you're not just throwing seeds around and hoping for the best. Crop rotation is your secret weapon, and no, it didn't start with the Romans. It's a savvy maneuver you've mastered to keep the soil from turning into a barren wasteland. You rotate your crops, maybe barley one season and then wheat the next, to prevent nutrient depletion. It's a clever trick that's as much about survival as it is about strategy. A bit like war, only with less blood and more dirt under your fingernails. And speaking of dirt, did you know that a single acre of land can yield up to 1,000 pounds of grain? That's a hefty load, but it's also necessary. Consider this. To support a city under siege, you're looking at stockpiling massive amounts of grain to last through the lean times. During the Trojan War, Troy was said to be under siege for 10 years. Imagine the granaries you'd need to keep the city from starving into surrender. It's not just about planting, it's about planning for the future. A future where you hope the gods are kinder and the harvest bountiful. As you work, you might catch a glimpse of the city walls in the distance, a reminder of the world beyond your fields. Troy isn't just a backdrop for epic tales, it's a thriving hub of commerce and culture. The markets are alive with the clink of coins and the chatter of traders, a stark contrast to the solitude of the fields. But those markets rely on your produce. The city's wealth may be built on trade, but it's sustained by agriculture. And here's a fun twist. While the myth of the Trojan horse is captivating, did you know there's no solid archaeological evidence it ever existed? It's a great story, sure, but it's likely more metaphor than reality. The real Trojan horse is the relentless labor you and your fellow farmers pour into the land, ensuring the city's survival one seed at a time. By midday, the sun is high, and you're sweating through your tunic. It's a tough life, no doubt about it. But there's a certain satisfaction in watching your efforts take root. You break for a simple meal. Bread, of course, maybe an olive or two if you're lucky. It's not much, but it's fuel for the work yet to come. As you munch, you can't help but think of the stories that will be told of this place. Heroes and battles will fill the pages of history, but what about the farmers? The real heroes of Troy are the ones who keep the city fed, who ensure the soldiers are strong enough to fight another day. Your tale might not be sung by bards, but it's no less crucial to the fabric of this ancient world. Afternoon rolls in, and with it, the promise of more toil. You head back to the fields, the sun relentless, the work unending. But there's a certain rhythm to it all, a cycle as old as time. You're part of something bigger, a community of farmers who understand that while the world may be enchanted by tales of gods and warriors, the true magic lies in the earth itself. As the day winds down and the sun dips toward the horizon, you gather your tools and head back home. It's been a long day, but you've done your part to ensure Troy's survival. You'll do it all again tomorrow, and the day after that, because that's what it means to be a Trojan farmer, a silent guardian of a city that will echo through history. So, as you settle onto your straw mattress once more, remember this. While the world celebrates the heroes of old, it's the quiet, steadfast work of the farmer that truly holds the city together. And who knows? Maybe one day your story will be told too. But for now, rest. Tomorrow promises more goats, more grain, and more of the same ancient, unending rhythm. The next morning, with your trusty straw mattress in the rearview mirror, you're off to the market, where the real action is. Forget about the glittering halls of King Priam, or the battlefield glory of Achilles. The heart of Troy beats in the bustling marketplace. It's here that the day's catch of fish, bales of wool, and yes, your own sacks of barley and wheat find their way into the hands of traders and citizens alike. You can practically smell the bartering in the air, a heady mix of sweat, determination, and the faint hint of olive oil liquid gold in this part of the world. Now, let's dive into this Trojan economy, the invisible web that connects your little plot of land to the far reaches of the known world. You might not realize it, but your morning's harvest is part of a grander scheme, a scheme that includes trade routes stretching from the Aegean Sea all the way to the mighty Hittite Empire in the east. And these trade routes, my friend, are the real stuff of legend. Sure, Homer might have you believe that Helen's beauty started the Trojan War, but any savvy merchant will tell you it's always about trade, always has been, always will be. Speaking of trade, let's talk olive oil. The stuff is more valuable than you might think, worth its weight in gold, if you'll pardon the cliché. In fact, a single amphora of olive oil could fetch a pretty penny in the markets of Mycenae or Crete, especially when you consider that a typical amphora could hold about 26 litres. That's a lot of salad dressing, assuming you're into that sort of thing, which, by the way, you're not. You're here to barter, not to fuss over culinary delights. But here's the kicker. Despite the bustling trade and the jingle of coins, there's something rather peculiar about the Trojan economy. You see, there was no standardized currency in Troy. That's right, no neat little coins to slip into your toga. Instead, the economy was a barter system more akin to organized chaos. You'd trade a sack of grain for a jug of oil or a few yards of wool, all based on the perceived value of the goods. It's like the ancient world's version of eBay, but with a lot more shouting. Now, let's take a pause to debunk another myth while we're at it. The Trojan War, as romanticized by poets and playwrights, often glosses over the economic motives. But those 10 years of conflict, they weren't just about a kidnapped queen. The reality is, control of the trade routes and the wealth they brought was a far more compelling reason to lay siege to a city. Troy's strategic location near the Dardanelles, a key waterway linking the Aegean to the Black Sea, made it a prime spot for controlling trade. And controlling trade means controlling wealth. It's less about love and more about logistics. As you haggle over the price of your wheat, you might overhear traders from distant lands, each with their own tale to tell. The Phoenicians, renowned for their purple dye and seafaring prowess, are known to frequent these markets. Their ships, laden with goods from across the Mediterranean, are a testament to the interconnectedness of ancient economies. It's a small world, after all, even in 1200 BC. But before we get too starry-eyed about this melting pot of cultures, let's remember the flip side. War and trade, two sides of the same coin, have a nasty habit of being intertwined. The very roots that brought prosperity also brought conflict. The ebb and flow of goods could just as easily turn into the ebb and flow of blood, as rival cities and empires clashed over control. In this ancient game of Monopoly, there were no get-out-of-jail-free cards, only swords and shields. Back in the marketplace, as the sun reaches its zenith, the clamour continues unabated. The traders, each with their own agenda, weave a complex tapestry of deals and exchanges. And through it all, your role, humble as it may seem, is crucial. Without your grain, your olives, your sweat and toil, the wheels of the Trojan economy would grind to a halt. The soldiers might march to the beat of war drums, but it's the farmers' produce that fuels their journey. As the afternoon wears on, you can't help but marvel at the sheer scale of it all. The market is a living organism, pulsing with energy and life. It's a chaotic symphony, each transaction a note in a larger composition. And while your part may seem small, it's essential. You're the backbone of this ancient economy, just as important as any warrior or king. So, as you pack up your remaining goods and prepare to head back to the fields, take a moment to appreciate the complexity of it all. The legends of Troy might focus on the heroes and the battles, but you know better. The true story lies in the everyday, in the mundane exchanges that keep the city alive. It's a tale of trade and toil, of markets and merchants, of farmers and fighters. And it's a story that's still being written, one transaction at a time. And as you pack up your remaining goods and prepare to head back to the fields, you're not just pondering the economic web you're a part of. Oh no, we're diving into the social soup of Trojan life, a place where the drama isn't confined to the battlefield. Forget Helen and Paris for a moment and consider the cast of characters that make up the real Trojan society. You see, while those two are busy starring in a romantic tragedy, the rest of Troy is caught in a political and social dance that's as intricate as any ancient Greek chorus. This isn't just a city of warriors and walled fortresses, it's a tapestry of hierarchies and hidden power plays. At the top of the heap, you've got local chieftains and nobles. Folks like King Priam who, let's face it, has a lot on his plate. Running a kingdom under siege while managing a family straight out of a soap opera isn't exactly a walk in the park. Priam's sons, like Hector and Paris, are the poster boys for the warrior class, but they're just the tip of the spear, so to speak. Beneath the nobles, there's a network of bureaucrats, scribes, and priests who keep the wheels turning. Think of them as the ancient world's middle management. They're the ones who make sure the city doesn't collapse into chaos, balancing the needs of the elite with those of the common folk. These are the people who decide whether your grain is getting taxed at a back-breaking rate or if you're getting a free pass this season. Spoiler, it's usually the former. Now, here's where you come in. The farmers and labourers, the real backbone of society. You might be toiling in the dirt, but without your sweat and tears, the whole societal structure would crumble faster than you can say Trojan horse. And speaking of horses, let's not forget the actual four-legged kind, which are more likely to be pulling ploughs than hiding Greek soldiers. Trojan society is a well-oiled machine, but it's not without its quirks. The Spartans might have their agoge and the Athenians their democracy, but in Troy, it's all about who you know and how well you can navigate the tangled web of alliances and rivalries. The city's political climate is as changeable as the Aegean Sea. One minute you're in favour, the next you're out in the cold, wondering if it was something you said at the last feast. And while we're on the topic of feasts, let's talk gossip. Because let's be honest, nothing cuts through the monotony of daily life quite like a bit of scandal. Rumours about the Greek camp across the way are the ancient equivalent of tabloid headlines. Are they really running out of food? Is Achilles sulking in his tent again? And what's the deal with Odysseus and that wooden horse idea? It's all fodder for conversation as you till the fields or share a drink at the local tavern. But let's not get too carried away with the rumour mill. The political stakes in Troy are high, and the wrong word to the wrong person could land you in hot water faster than a Spartan charge. This is a world where alliances are forged over shared meals and broken over perceived slights. The balance of power is delicate, and the wrong move could tip the scales in favour of the Greeks, who are still camped out on the beach like it's some sort of extended vacation. Now, if we peel back the layers of this society, it's clear that agriculture is the lifeblood of Troy. Without a steady supply of food, even the mightiest walls can't hold. The city's survival hinges on the ability of its farmers to produce enough to sustain the population, especially when faced with the prospect of a prolonged siege. It's a high-stakes game of resource management, where the currency isn't gold but grain. But let's spare a thought for the ancient politicians of Troy, the ones who have to make the tough calls. Imagine being in a council meeting where the agenda includes everything from food distribution to defense strategies. It's like juggling flaming torches while riding a unicycle. One wrong move and the whole thing comes crashing down. And yet, somehow, it all holds together, at least for now. As you make your way back to the fields, you can't help but marvel at the complexity of it all. The social dynamics, the political intrigue, the ever-present threat of war, all of it woven into the daily life of a city that's more than just a backdrop for epic tales. It's a living, breathing entity with its own rhythm and pulse. In this world, the farmers are the unsung heroes, their work unglamorous but essential. Without them, the city's grand narratives would lack the foundation needed to stand the test of time. So, as the sun begins its descent and the shadows lengthen, you return to your plot of land with a renewed sense of purpose. Because while the poets may sing of warriors and kings, you know that the true heart of Troy beats in the fields where every seed sown is a promise of tomorrow. And so, you continue your work, knowing that each day spent in the fields is a day spent preserving the legacy of a city that will echo through history. You're part of a story that's still unfolding, one that's as rich and complex as the soil beneath your feet. And maybe, just maybe, one day your efforts will be recognized and the world will know the true story of the farmers of Troy. Until then, you'll keep planting, keep harvesting, and keep the lifeblood of Troy flowing, one grain at a time. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the skies with hues of orange and purple, you finally get to hang up your plough and enjoy the simple pleasures that the evening in Troy has to offer. Now, before you start conjuring images of lavish banquets and golden goblets overflowing with wine, let's get one thing straight. You, my friend, are a farmer, not a Mycenaean king. So, while Priam might be lounging in the palace with a roasted boar and a bard strumming the lyre, you're looking forward to something far more down-to-earth, a modest dinner with your fellow Trojan dirt-dwellers. Your evening meal is as humble as your day. Was hectic, barley bread, maybe a bit of cheese if the goats were feeling generous, and a splash of wine that's probably more vinegar than vintage. And yet, there's a certain charm in this simplicity. Gathered around the communal table, you and your fellow farmers swap stories and share laughs, the camaraderie as warm as the fire crackling nearby. These moments, however understated, are the real heart of Trojan leisure, where the bonds of friendship are forged not in the fires of war, but in the glow of shared experience. Now, let's talk entertainment. Forget the epic poems for a moment. Those tales of dashing heroes and divine interventions are more likely to be composed by scribes with a flair for the dramatic than recited by your average Trojan. In reality, your evenings are filled with more relatable pastimes. How about a game of dice? Sure, Plato might have later associated dice games with reckless behaviour, but here in Troy they're just as likely to serve as a means of relaxation as a source of ruin. The dice themselves are simple, carved from bone or stone, and the stakes are never too high, perhaps a few olives or a loaf of bread, but nothing that would break the bank. Or maybe you're more of the music enthusiast. The lyre isn't just for heroic ballads after all. It can be plucked along to simple tunes that celebrate the everyday, with lyrics that might not earn a spot in the Iliad, but resonate with the lived experiences of farmers. Music in Troy isn't about grandiose performances, it's about the shared joy of song, the way a melody can lift spirits after a long day in the fields. It's the kind of music that would never make it to the Olympic amphitheatres, but serves its purpose well enough around a Trojan hearth. Storytelling, of course, is another staple of your evening gatherings, but let's not get carried away with tales of Achilles and Hector just yet. Your stories are less about the lofty deeds of demigods and more about the exploits of local heroes, cunning traders who outwitted rivals, or farmers who outsmarted the elements to save a crop from disaster. These stories, grounded in reality, may not have the sweeping drama or divine meddling of Homer's epics, but they capture the essence of Trojan life just as poignantly. And speaking of Homer, let's address the giant wooden elephant in the room, the Trojan horse. It's a fantastic tale, no doubt, Greeks hidden inside a massive wooden horse sneaking into Troy under the cover of night. But let's be real here. For the average Trojan, the idea of constructing such an elaborate decoy seems as fantastical as a centaur running through the marketplace. There's no archaeological evidence to support the existence of this equine Trojan trickery, but the story has certainly galloped through the ages. It's a narrative that captures the imagination, even if it stretches the bounds of believability. The reality for you and your fellow farmers is that the real intrigue lies not in wooden beasts, but in the everyday challenges of life under siege. You're more concerned with the practicalities of existence, how to stretch your supplies, how to manage the distribution of limited resources, how to keep morale high in the face of uncertainty. It's not as glamorous as a clandestine Greek plot, but it's a story of resilience that deserves its own place in history. As the night wears on, you might find yourself engaged in a bit of philosophical debate. And while you're not exactly Socrates, you do have opinions about the world, the war, and the future of Troy. Conversations around the fire can range from the mundane to the profound, touching on everything from the price of barley to the nature of the gods. It's a reminder that even in ancient times, people were grappling with big questions, trying to make sense of their place in the universe. These discussions often circle back to the pressing issues of the day, namely, how long this siege will last and what it will mean for the city's future. There's a palpable tension in the air, the sense that the fate of Troy hangs in the balance. But for now, in this moment, you find solace in the company of friends, in the shared laughter and camaraderie that transcend the hardships of the day. These are the moments that make life in Troy worthwhile, the simple pleasures that anchor you in a world that often seems on the brink of chaos. And in those quiet hours, as the fire burns low and the stars dot the sky like ancient witnesses, you can almost forget the grand narratives that swirl around you. Because here, in the heart of the city, you're not just a character in someone else's epic, you're living your own story, one that's rich with the details of everyday life, the struggles and triumphs that define the human experience. It's a story that might never be sung by poets, but it's yours, and that's what truly matters. So as you head to bed, the echoes of laughter and song still lingering in the air, remember that while the world may be fascinated by the legends of Troy, it's the quiet moments, the shared meals, the games of dice, the simple joys of community that form the true tapestry of your life. And though the poets may focus on the clash of swords and the deeds of kings, you know that the real heart of Troy beats in the fields and firesides where the essence of human connection can be found. And that's a tale worth telling, even if it never makes it into the history books. And so, as you drift off into the realm of dreams, let's take a moment to ponder the legacy of the world you're leaving behind for the night, the world of Troy, where the soil holds more secrets than any bard's tale. The echoes of your daily toil ripple through history, a testament to the unsung backbone of civilization, the farmer. While Achilles and Hector might grab the spotlight, it's your calloused hands that cradle the real story of Troy's endurance. First, let's talk agriculture, a topic that might not have the glamour of warfare but carries a weighty significance. You see, the fields you've been tending with sweat and determination are more than just a backdrop to epic battles. They're the cradle of life itself. The grains you plant and harvest aren't just feeding your fellow Trojans, they're laying down the agricultural blueprints for civilizations to come. It's not just a matter of survival, but of progress. Crop rotation, for instance, is a trick you've mastered that will echo down the corridors of time, eventually reaching the Romans, who will think they've invented it. Spoiler alert, they haven't. Now, consider the scale of your operation. An acre of land producing 1,000 pounds of grain isn't just impressive, it's transformative. This surplus allows for trade, which in turn fosters cultural exchanges and economic stability. It's like the ancient version of globalization, a silent revolution fueled by your daily grind. The surplus grain doesn't just fill Trojan bellies, it fills the coffers, making Troy a pivotal player in the ancient economy. And let's not overlook the fact that while Troy is fending off Greek advances, it's your harvests that keep the city's heart beating, ensuring that the tale of Troy doesn't end in starvation. Speaking of tales, let's not forget the mythic allure of Troy, the kind of story that gets passed down through generations, embellished with each retelling until it's more fantasy than fact. The city itself becomes a character, immortalized in poetry, yet the real lore is in the mundane. Sure, the Trojan horse is a headline grabber, but the real intrigue lies in how a city under siege sustained itself for a decade. It wasn't wooden trickery that kept Troy afloat, it was the relentless effort of farmers like you, battling not with swords, but with the stubborn soil. The reality is, while the poets were busy crafting verses, you were crafting the future. Your methods, your resilience, set the stage for agricultural practices that would underpin future empires. Those sacks of barley and wheat, they're the unsung heroes, each grain a small but vital piece of a much larger tapestry. The Romans, the Greeks, even the Egyptians would later build on the agricultural foundations that you helped establish. And it's this quiet, persistent labour that ultimately shapes the course of history, not the fleeting glory of a battlefield victory. But let's not get too wrapped up in romantic notions of heroism. The truth is, life as a Trojan farmer was tough. There were no days off, no respite from the demands of the land. Weather, pests, and the whims of the gods made your work a constant gamble. Yet, it was a gamble you took, day in and day out, knowing that the stakes were not just your survival, but the survival of your city. And while the myths might gloss over these realities, it's this gritty determination that's truly worthy of legend. As we peel back the layers of this narrative, it's clear that the myths, while captivating, often obscure the hard truths. The legacy of Troy isn't just in the stories of heroes and gods, but in the everyday lives of its people. Your daily grind, the sweat and toil, is the real epic, a story of endurance, ingenuity, and quiet triumph. It's the kind of legacy that doesn't make it into the epic poems, but endures nonetheless, woven into the very fabric of history. So, the next time you hear tales of ancient grandeur, remember the farmers. Remember the unsung heroes who sowed the seeds of civilization, who turned the soil into a living testament to human resilience. Because in the end, while the poets might sing of battles and betrayals, it's the quiet persistence of people like you that truly shapes the world. And as you close your eyes, take comfort in knowing that your story, though perhaps untold, is a vital thread in the grand tapestry of history. Sleep well, knowing that while the world may remember the legends, it's the reality you lived that made them possible. When it comes to ancient Athens, folks often picture toga-clad philosophers endlessly pontificating under the blazing Mediterranean sun. But behind that romantic image lies a more nuanced truth. Athens in the 5th century BCE wasn't just about hitting the democratic ballot box, it was about hitting the books, or, to be precise, the scrolls. This was the era when education became the hottest ticket in town, and if you weren't invited, well, tough luck. Not everyone was destined to become the next Socrates. In fact, many Athenians wouldn't have known a syllogism if it jumped up and bit them. Let's get one thing straight right off the bat. Athenian education was as exclusive as a VIP club with a bouncer named Aristotle. Only free male citizens had the privilege to engage in this intellectual soiree. Women, slaves, and foreigners, known as metics, were left to watch from the sidelines. The great myth of universal enlightenment takes a hit here, doesn't it? Despite the grandeur of democracy that Athens is credited with birthing, its educational system was decidedly aristocratic in who it chose to enlighten. Now, for those lucky enough to be born into the right gender and social class, Athenian education was a two-act play. It started with the basics, where young boys, around the tender age of 7, were shepherded to a place known as a didaskalion. This wasn't your average schoolhouse, think of it more as a one-room school of life. Here, they got their fill of reading, writing, and arithmetic, the holy trinity of classical education. The curriculum was about as thrilling as watching paint dry by today's standards, but it laid the groundwork for the real show rhetoric and philosophy. Fast forward a few years, and these boys, now strapping young lads, moved on to the gymnasium. No, this wasn't a place to perfect your deadlift form, it was where the Athenian youth got their intellectual muscles in shape. This is where it got interesting. The curriculum wasn't just about flexing your mental biceps, it was about learning to speak and reason effectively. Rhetoric, the art of persuasion, was the cornerstone. Picture a young Demosthenes, tongue-tied and stumbling, slowly transforming into a silver-tongued orator. That was the goal. But why all this emphasis on rhetoric? Well, in a society where public speaking could make or break your career in politics or law, being articulate was as crucial as having a good sword arm. The Athenian assembly wasn't for the faint-hearted, it was a verbal gladiator arena. If you couldn't hold your own in a debate, you were as good as exiled, figuratively, if not literally. And then there was philosophy, the cerebral icing on the educational cake. This wasn't just navel-gazing for the sake of it. Philosophy was about understanding the nature of reality and the self. It was the intellectual backbone of the Athenian identity. Philosophers like Socrates, who famously quipped, "The unexamined life is not worth living," could be found strolling the agora, questioning everything like a kid who just discovered the endless why game. Now, if you're wondering what all this knowledge cost, let's just say it wasn't cheap. An education in Athens could set a family back a pretty drachma. It was a significant investment, and not everyone could afford it. This was education as a luxury commodity, not a public right. The fees for a good teacher, like a respected sophist, could rival those of a modern Ivy League tuition. So, while Athens was the cradle of Western civilization, it was also a cradle that rocked only a select few. But here's a fun twist. While the image of the learned Athenian has been polished to a shine over the centuries, the reality was that many lived oblivious to the intellectual pursuits of the elite. For the average Athenian, life revolved around commerce, farming, and daily survival. The idea that every Athenian was a philosopher in the making is as mythical as Pegasus. In truth, the educational system was designed to perpetuate a certain way of thinking and to preserve social hierarchies. It was a system that, while revolutionary in its focus on developing the mind, was also conservative in who it allowed to partake in the intellectual feast. It's a classic case of the haves and have-nots, where knowledge was power, and power was kept within a tight circle. So, as we delve deeper into the world of Athenian education, let's keep our eyes peeled for the cracks in the marble facade. This was a society that revered knowledge, sure, but it also jealously guarded it. The pursuit of wisdom may have been a noble cause, but it was one that not everyone was invited to join. As we move forward, remember that the story of Athenian education is as much about exclusion as it is about enlightenment. The path to knowledge was paved with good intentions and plenty of barriers. Now, speaking of exclusion, let's talk about the economics of getting that Athenian education. You might think that the cost of knowledge back then wasn't too bad since, they didn't have to pay for Netflix or gym memberships. But think again. The ancient Athenian education system was like a high-stakes poker game, where only a few could afford to ante up. Hiring a tutor for your little Demosthenes could cost a family several drachmas a year, and that's before you even got to the cost of scrolls. And these weren't your casual bedtime reads. We're talking about scrolls that, if they had covers, would have been glossy and embossed, priced to make a modern college textbook seem like it came from the discount bin. In fact, a single scroll could set you back as much as 1 or 2 drachmas, and considering that a skilled worker might earn just 1 drachma a day, you can see how quickly those costs added up. For the average Athenian, spending a day's wages on a scroll was about as feasible as buying a Lamborghini on a lemonade stand budget. So who was footing the bill for all this intellectual luxury? You guessed it, the Athenian elite, those lucky few who could afford both the entrance fee and the endless refills of philosophical wine. Of course, money wasn't just paying for scrolls and tutors. It was also buying access to the creme de la creme of Athenian thinkers, the sophists. Now, these guys have a reputation that swings between revered educators and smooth-talking charlatans. Picture a sophist as the ancient world's version of a self-help guru, complete with the ancient equivalent of a TED Talk. They were the rock stars of rhetoric, teaching young Athenians the art of persuasion, which was as coveted a skill as it is today. The sophists knew their worth and charged accordingly, with some like Protagoras raking in up to 100 minae for a course. For context, that's roughly the annual salary of a professional Athenian soldier. Talk about putting your money where your mouth is. Yet, the sophists weren't just about lining their tunics with drachmas. They were controversial because they taught that truth could be subjective, a notion that didn't sit well with everyone, especially the likes of Socrates, who believed in universal truths. To some, sophists were intellectual liberators. To others, they were selling intellectual snake oil. But love them or hate them, they were undeniably part of the educational landscape, shaping the minds and wallets of those who could afford their steep fees. And let's not forget the role of the state in this educational circus. Athens did provide some public schooling, but it was about as bare bones as a minimalist's living room. If you wanted to swim in the deep end of the intellectual pool, you had to pay for your own lifeguard. The Athenian education system, then, was a mirror, reflecting the social and economic divides of the city. While the elite waxed poetic in their exclusive symposiums, the common folk were busy keeping the wheels of daily life turning. The allure of being part of this intellectual elite was strong, but the barriers were higher than Mount Olympus. It wasn't just about having the right connections, it was about having the right number of drachmas jingling in your coin pouch. In this way, wealth didn't just shape educational opportunities, it welded them. The exclusive nature of Athenian education ensured that the same families dominated the intellectual and political arenas generation after generation. Knowledge was power, but it was power that came with a hefty price tag. Yet there's a certain romance in the idea of the Athenian intellectual elite gathering in shaded groves, debating the nature of justice and beauty. It's an image that's hard to shake, even when confronted with the cold, hard facts of economic disparity. The allure of ancient Athens as a bastion of wisdom is compelling, but it's crucial to remember that for many, the wisdom was as distant as the stars in the Attic sky. As we continue to peel back the layers of this ancient world, we'll see how these economic and social dynamics played out in other arenas. But for now, let's keep in mind that behind every scroll and sophist was a system built on both aspiration and exclusion. The Athenian dream of knowledge was real, but like all dreams, it was reserved for those who could afford to dream big. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the currents of Athenian society, where education intersected with politics, philosophy, and the very fabric of Athenian life. So, we've been peeling back the layers of Athenian education, but let's not forget, it wasn't just an intellectual exercise, it was a political tool too. Picture ancient Athens as a grand stage where every citizen could play a part, provided they passed the audition of public speaking. The assembly was the place to be if you wanted to make your voice heard or at least drown out the others. It wasn't just a hub of democracy, it was a verbal colosseum. And in this arena, rhetoric was your sword and shield. In 5th century BCE Athens, democracy wasn't a passive experience, it was more like a contact sport, with words as the primary weapon. The assembly, open to free male citizens, was where decisions affecting the city-state were debated and voted on. We're talking about thousands of men gathered on the Pnyx, a hill overlooking the city. It was here that education revealed its true political clout. If you could argue convincingly, you could sway decisions on war, peace, and everything in between. This was where the educated elite flexed their rhetorical muscles, and where the fate of Athens could be determined by who had the louder, more persuasive voice. But let's not romanticize it too much. This wasn't the modern democratic ideal of one person, one vote. Women, slaves, and metics were excluded from this civic engagement by default. It was democracy, sure, but with a seriously exclusive guest list. To put it bluntly, Athenian democracy was about as egalitarian as a yacht club with a members-only policy. The reality was that true political participation required not just citizenship, but also the skill and the education to make your voice count in the cacophony of the assembly. Now, the assembly wasn't the only place where Athenian education and politics intertwined. The law courts, or dikasteria, were another arena where rhetoric reigned supreme. With no professional lawyers or judges, each citizen had to fend for themselves or hire a speechwriter, known as a logographer, to craft their arguments. Here again, rhetorical skill could tip the scales of justice. It was a system that favored those who could afford a good education or a good logographer. The average Joe, or should I say the average Cleon, might find himself out-argued and outclassed. This brings us to a classic Athenian paradox. The city prided itself on democratic ideals, yet the system was inherently stacked in favor of those who could afford the educational leg up. It's like being handed the keys to a Ferrari, but finding out the road is only open to those with a gold-plated driver's license. The intellectual elite, with their polished speeches and persuasive arguments, held the real power, making the assembly and the law courts more like exclusive clubs than egalitarian institutions. But while we're on the subject of exclusivity, let's talk about who didn't get a seat at the table: women and slaves. The romantic notion of Athens as a cradle of democracy crumbles a bit when you consider that nearly half the population was effectively voiceless. Women were expected to focus on household duties, their education limited to domestic skills. Forget Aristotle, they were more likely to be schooled in the art of weaving than in the art of persuasion. Aspasia, the famous companion of Pericles, was an exception rather than the rule, a rare woman who could engage in intellectual debate. And as for slaves, Well, their situation was even bleaker. Slaves were the engine room of Athenian society, doing everything from household chores to labour-intensive tasks in the silver mines of Laurium. The idea of education for slaves was as foreign as a spaceship landing in the Agora. They were considered property, not people, and their role in society was to support the system, not participate in it. The stark divide in educational opportunity underscores a brutal truth. Athenian democracy was built on a foundation of inequality. It was a society where freedom and education were privileges for the few, not rights for the many. Yet, despite its flaws, the allure of Athens as a beacon of intellectual and political advancement remains powerful. The myth endures because it's a story of aspiration, even if the reality was more a tale of exclusion. In a way, Athens can be seen as the original fake-it-till-you-make-it society. The city presented itself as a model of democratic ideals, yet its institutions were riddled with inequalities that modern eyes find hard to ignore. The education system, with its focus on creating articulate citizens, was a crucial part of maintaining the status quo. It perpetuated a cycle where those who had could continue to have, while those who didn't remained on the outside looking in. So, what does this tell us about human nature? Perhaps that we're drawn to ideals even when the reality is messier. The Athenian dream of an educated citizenry governing themselves is compelling, but the execution was far from perfect. It's a reminder that even the loftiest ideals can be undermined by the practicalities of power and privilege. As we move forward, we'll see how these dynamics played out in other aspects of Athenian life and how the city's legacy continues to influence modern thought. But for now, let's keep our eyes on the horizon, where the promise of democracy and the reality of exclusion meet in the Athenian twilight. The story isn't over yet. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the complexities of this ancient society, where the pursuit of knowledge was both a path to enlightenment and a tool of control. As we sail further into the labyrinthine waters of Athenian society, let's pause to consider the social prestige tethered to being a learned Athenian. Education wasn't just a ticket to the democratic dance, it was your golden pass into the social stratosphere. Picture this, the ancient version of today's high-powered networking events, where who you knew was as crucial as what you knew. In Athens, a well-educated man wasn't just admired, he was practically a walking status symbol, like a Louis Vuitton handbag of the classical world. Now, let's dive into the social dynamics of Athens, where the pressure to sound clever was as palpable as the wine flowing at those famous symposiums. These gatherings were the intellectual Olympics of the era, minus the medals and with more libations. Think of them as ancient Greek TED Talks, but with a lot more philosophizing and, naturally, a lot more wine. In the dimly lit corners of these symposiums, the Athenian elite would gather to showcase their rhetorical gymnastics and philosophical musings. Here, being articulate was your bread and butter, and your ability to wax lyrical could win you more social capital than a pocketful of drachmas. But before we get too carried away with the romantic notion of these symposiums, let's bust a few myths. The reality was that all this intellectual sparring often resulted in more hot air than substance. Imagine a room full of men, each trying to outdo the other with clever quips and convoluted arguments, like a Twitter thread that just won't quit. The pressure to perform was intense, and it wasn't just about impressing your peers, it was about solidifying your place in society. An Athenian's ability to drop a Socratic mic was as crucial to his social standing as his wealth or family name. This brings us to a fascinating paradox. While Athens prided itself on intellectual achievement, the reality was that much of the philosophical debate was inaccessible to the average citizen. The symposiums, much like the education system that fed into them, were exclusive affairs. They were the playground of those who could afford an education, and by extension, a seat at the intellectual table. For the common folk, these gatherings were as distant as the summit of Mount Olympus. Sure, the philosophical discourse was heady stuff, but it was also riddled with elitism. And let's not forget about the personal relationships that were forged or fractured within these intellectual circles. The social cachet of being a learned Athenian extended beyond the symposium to the very fabric of personal alliances. Friendships and rivalries were often cemented on the strength of one's rhetorical prowess. An incisive comment or a witty retort could win you allies or make you enemies faster than you could say Plato. Now, The symposium wasn't just a venue for philosophical sparring. It was also a stage where political alliances were born and nurtured. The lines between personal and political were as blurred as the wine-soaked conversations themselves. In a city where politics was everyone's business, or at least every free male citizen's business, the ability to navigate these social waters was crucial. Being a well-connected intellectual wasn't just about prestige, it was about power. But here's the kicker. While these symposiums were ostensibly about the pursuit of knowledge, they were also rife with posturing and pretense. The pressure to sound clever often led to a lot of talking without much saying. It was as if the more verbose you were, the more intelligent you appeared. This intellectual one-upmanship sometimes overshadowed genuine inquiry, turning the pursuit of wisdom into something of a spectator sport. Yet, despite, or perhaps because of, this veneer of sophistication, the symposiums retained their allure. They were the beating heart of Athenian social life, where philosophy, politics, and personal ambition intertwined in a heady cocktail. For those on the inside, it was the place to be. For those on the outside, it was a tantalizing glimpse of a world they could only dream of entering. So, what does this tell us about human nature? Perhaps it reveals our enduring fascination with the pursuit of status and the lengths we'll go to achieve it. The Athenian Symposium, much like the education system that fed into it, was a microcosm of the broader societal dynamics at play. It was a world where knowledge was power, and power was the ultimate prize. As we continue to unravel the complexities of Athenian society, we'll explore how these social and intellectual dynamics played out in other arenas. The story of Athens is far from over, and the interplay between education, social standing, and personal relationships is a rich tapestry still being unwoven. So stay tuned as we delve deeper into the ancient world, where the pursuit of knowledge was as much about personal ambition as it was about enlightenment. The Athenian saga continues, and there's still much more to discover. So, let's shake the dust off those ancient scrolls and fast forward to how this Athenian legacy stands tall, or maybe wobbles on the stage of modern education. The echoes of Athens aren't just for history buffs, they're woven into the fabric of today's classrooms and lecture halls. Think of the Socratic method, a staple of law schools and philosophy classes, where students are grilled with questions until their brains feel like they're doing mental gymnastics. It's the intellectual equivalent of CrossFit, and we have Athens to thank or blame for that rigorous workout. But hold your laurel wreaths, because the influence of Athenian education isn't all gold medals and glory. It's a mixed bag, much like a plate of olives where some turn out perfectly ripe and others are just pits. For starters, the exclusivity that once kept the Athenian intellectual gates bolted still raises its head with a modern twist. Take the Ivy League, for instance. Elite institutions where the cost of a degree could buy a small island or at least a very nice yacht. It's the same old story, education is a luxury, not a right. The Athenians might have swapped drachmas for dollars, but the price tag on enlightenment remains sky high. Let's not gloss over the democratic ideals that Athens planted, though. Today, education is often touted as the great equalizer, a tool to lift people out of poverty and into prosperity. The idea that anyone, regardless of birth or background, can rise through merit has a decidedly Athenian ring. Yet, like a Greek tragedy, the potential for redemption is often overshadowed by systemic barriers. In Athens, it was gender and class. Today, it's race, geography, and economic disparity. The silhouettes of exclusion might have shifted, but the shadows they cast are just as long. And what about the Athenian obsession with rhetoric? It's alive and well in the world of politics and law, where silver tongues still carry more weight than golden intentions. A well-crafted argument today can win court cases, sway elections, and even sell you the ultimate avocado slicer on late-night TV. The ability to persuade, to argue, to convince, these are the direct descendants of Athenian education, where rhetoric wasn't just a subject, it was the subject. Our modern-day Demosthenes are the politicians and lawyers who can turn the tide with a well-placed word or a cleverly constructed phrase. However, while Athens gave us the art of persuasion, it also gave us the art of pretense. The symposiums of old, with their intellectual showboating, are not unlike today's social media platforms. Replace the dimly lit rooms and wine with glowing screens and likes, and you've got a modern symposium where everyone is trying to outdo each other in 280 characters or less. The urge to showcase one's intellect, or at least appear intellectual, is as potent now as it was then. The Athenian love for debate has morphed into a digital battleground where the loudest, not necessarily the wisest, often prevail. And here's a curveball: the Athenian model of education, with its focus on rhetoric and philosophy, emphasized critical thinking, a skill that's often touted as essential today. Yet, in our test-obsessed culture, where standardized exams loom like the Minotaur in the maze, genuine inquiry can get lost. The Athenian ideal of questioning everything is sometimes at odds with a system that values rote learning over real understanding. It's like trying to fit a toga into a business suit. The essence is there, but the fit is a little off. Now, let's address the elephant, or perhaps the Greek god. In the room, education is a status symbol. In ancient Athens, knowledge was power, and power was a pedestal. Today, diplomas and degrees often serve as the modern equivalent of that pedestal, symbols of prestige rather than just intellectual achievement. Just as the Athenian elite flaunted their education at symposiums, today's graduates might brandish their degrees at alumni networking events or on LinkedIn profiles. The struggle between education as a genuine pursuit of knowledge and as a mark of social standing is a battle as old as Socrates' sandals. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater or the philosopher with the scroll. The Athenian legacy, with all its warts and wisdom, serves as a reminder of the potential and pitfalls of education. It's a blueprint for both what to emulate and what to avoid. The dream of a society open to ideas, where debate and dialogue are encouraged, is still alive and kicking, even if it's occasionally interrupted by the reality of tuition fees and social media spats. So, as we wrap up this journey through the ancient classrooms and symposiums of Athens, let's take a moment to reflect on the brilliance and buffoonery of it all. The pursuit of knowledge, whether in a marble-columned academy or a modern university, remains a noble cause. But as the Athenians showed us, the path to enlightenment is often strewn with obstacles, both human-made and institutional. It's a reminder that while the quest for wisdom is timeless, the journey is fraught with the follies of ambition and exclusion. In the end, the Athenian legacy is like a well-worn scroll, full of lessons and contradictions. It invites us to ponder the balance between education as a tool for personal growth and a means of social stratification. As we close the book on this chapter of history, let's carry forward the ideals that inspire us while acknowledging the realities that challenge us. After all, the story of Athenian education is a tale as much about aspiration as it is about the human condition, an epic worth telling, retelling, and learning from as we carve our own paths through the labyrinth of life. In the bustling tapestry of history, where everyone seems to have their favourite ancient civilization, Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, there's a party happening in the Andes that's been going on for thousands of years, and no one seems to talk about it. Yep, we're talking about ancient Peru, where people were taking the humble textile and turning it into a masterpiece long before the toga was even a thing. Sure, the Romans were busy building roads and aqueducts, but down in Peru, around 2500 BCE, they were already spinning a tale of threads that would make any modern fashionista swoon. Let's start with the Paracas and the Nazca, two cultures that took textiles from mere necessity to sheer artistry. Picture this. You're living in a time when your clothes aren't just about covering up. They're a status symbol, a form of communication, and sometimes even a form of currency. The Paracas, for instance, were weaving textiles so intricate and colourful that they're still dazzling today. Think about it. These guys were crafting garments with over 200 threads per inch. To put that in perspective, the average t-shirt you might be wearing right now, probably around 40 threads per inch. These were no mere clothing items, they were walking canvases. Meanwhile, the Nazca were not to be outdone, known for their mysterious geoglyphs, those giant drawings in the desert visible only from the sky. They were equally adept at weaving their culture into fabric. Their textiles featured vibrant colours and complex patterns, with designs that often mirrored the very lines they etched into the earth. It's almost as if these folks were trying to say, hey future generations, check out what we can do with a bit of alpaca and cotton. Oh, and did I mention they were doing all this around 2,000 years ago? That's right. While the Romans were busy conquering territories, the Nazca were conquering the textile world. Now, let's take a closer look at the materials they were using. Alpaca wool and cotton were the staples here, and they were spun with such skill that it would make even the most seasoned modern textile artist a little envious. Alpacas, those adorable, fluffy creatures that look like they might just wander into a yoga class, were domesticated in the Andes for their soft, durable fleece. Cotton, on the other hand, was cultivated along the coast, where the climate was just right for this versatile plant. Together they created a perfect duo, a kind of ancient Andean blend that would have been the envy of any contemporary fabric store. But what really sets these textiles apart is not just their beauty, but their cultural significance. In ancient Peru, textiles were more than just fabric, they were a medium of expression and a symbol of power. The finest textiles were often reserved for the elite, used in rituals, and even as offerings to the gods. They were an integral part of social identity, a way to signal one's status without saying a word. Imagine walking into a room, not needing to brag about your wealth or position because your clothes did all the talking. That's the power these textiles held. And let's not forget the economic clout. Textiles were a major trade item, exchanged along vast networks that stretched across the Andean region. This wasn't your average barter system. It was a sophisticated economy where fabric was as valuable as gold. To get a sense of scale, consider this. A single Paracas textile could take several years to complete, employing the labour of many artisans. It was a labour of love and a testament to the high regard in which these items were held. Of course, it's easy to romanticize the past, to imagine these ancient weavers as serene artisans working in sunlit workshops, but let's be real. The reality was probably a mix of creativity, hard labour, and a good dose of stress, especially when the local chieftain was waiting on a new ceremonial poncho. And while we might imagine them as isolated geniuses, these weavers were part of a larger community, exchanging techniques and styles across regions. It was a vibrant, interconnected world, far removed from the cliched primitive label it often gets slapped with. So, as we unravel the threads of ancient Peruvian textiles, we start to see a picture of a society where the loom was as much a tool of power as the sword. It's a story of innovation, artistry, and a bit of competitive flair, all woven into the fabric of history. And as we move forward, we'll explore how these textiles weren't just the height of fashion, but also a cornerstone of the economy and a key player in the social structures of their time. But more on that in the next installment, because trust me, this is one yarn you'll want to keep following. Now, speaking of yarns worth following, let's unravel the technicolor world of Andean dyeing techniques. If you think your tie-dye shirt from that one music festival is impressive, wait till you hear about what these ancient artisans were up to. We're talking about a vast palette crafted from nature's own toolkit, bugs and plants to be exact. You might be sipping your morning coffee, but the Paracas and Nazca were brewing up colour concoctions that would put any rainbow to shame. Enter the cochineal bug, a tiny, unassuming insect that packs a vibrant punch. This little critter, which clings to the prickly pear cactus, was the secret behind a red dye so intense it could make a cardinal blush. The process was as complex as it was fascinating. You'd harvest these bugs, dry them out, and then crush them into a fine powder. Mix that with a little bit of water, and voila, you've got yourself a dye that could turn any garment into a statement piece. This wasn't just any red. It was a deep crimson that made its way into the wardrobes of the elite, both in ancient times and later in European courts. Talk about an insect with a global impact. But let's not stop at red. The Andean palette was as diverse as the landscape itself, with hues pulled from a veritable apothecary of natural ingredients. Wild plants like the chilca and mole provided greens and yellows, while the elusive indigofera shrub offered a rich blue that was worth its weight in, well, textiles. What's truly wild is the chemistry involved. These artisans understood mordants, substances that fixed dyes to fabric, long before chemistry was even a subject in school. Alum, iron, and even urine, yes, you heard that right, were used to lock in these colours, making them last for centuries. So, the next time you're complaining about laundry day, just remember, it could be worse, you could be collecting urine. Now, let's address the elephant, or rather, the alpaca in the room. Were these Andean folks just sitting around in isolation, dyeing their fabrics and blissfully unaware of the world? Not quite. The trade networks in the Andes were as intricate as the textiles themselves. Picture this. A vast web of pathways connecting valleys and highlands, coastlines and mountaintops. These routes weren't just for moving goods, They were the veins through which knowledge and culture flowed. The cochineal dye, for instance, didn't just stay in the Andes. It hitched a ride on these trade routes, eventually finding its way to Europe, where it became the dye of choice for everything from royal garments to Renaissance paintings. But here's where the plot thickens. These networks weren't just about moving textiles. They were about spreading the know-how. Techniques for dyeing and weaving didn't just pop up in isolated pockets. They were shared, adapted, and refined across regions. This wasn't some quaint, closed-off society. This was a dynamic world of exchange and innovation. So, if anyone tells you that ancient Andean societies were isolated, you can confidently say that's a load of llama dung. Now, let's talk economics, because what's a good trade network without a little financial flair? In the grand scheme of things, textiles were the currency of the Andes. Forget gold and silver. If you wanted to flaunt your wealth, you did it with a finely woven, brilliantly coloured tunic, and the demand was insatiable. Royalty and elites across the region craved these vibrant textiles. The labour-intensive process of dyeing and weaving created an economy that was as vibrant as the colours themselves. Imagine, a single piece of dyed fabric could be worth a small fortune, traded for food, land, or even political favour. But let's not sugarcoat it. This wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. The labour involved was gruelling. Gathering cochineal bugs is no picnic, and neither is navigating the mountainous terrain of the Andes with bundles of textiles on your back. Yet, the resilience of these communities turned these challenges into strengths, fostering a culture of innovation and adaptability. It's a testament to human ingenuity that these societies not only survived, but thrived in such conditions. While we're busting myths, let's tackle another one, the idea that natural dyes are somehow inferior to synthetics. Sure, synthetic dyes are cheap and easy to produce, but they've got nothing on the depth and complexity of natural colours. The reds from cochineal, for instance, have a richness that synthetic dyes often struggle to replicate. Plus, natural dyes are biodegradable and sustainable qualities that modern industries are desperately trying to emulate. It's a classic case of ancient wisdom meeting modern necessity. So, as we weave through the vibrant tapestry of Andean dyeing, it's clear that these colours were more than just aesthetic choices. They were a vital part of a complex social and economic fabric, a testament to the creativity and resourcefulness of ancient Peruvian cultures. And this is just the beginning. As we continue to unravel the threads of this story, we'll explore how these textiles played a role in everything from religious rituals to political power plays. But that's a tale for another day. So stay tuned as we dig deeper into the loom of history. As we dig deeper into the loom of history, let's take a detour from the colourful trails of dye to the grand tapestry of the Inca Empire. Now, if you think textiles were just a side gig in ancient Peru, prepare to have your mind woven into knots. The Incas were the rock stars of the Andean textile world, and they didn't just stop at fashion statements. No, they took it all the way to the top, making textiles a cornerstone of their social hierarchy and economic might. Imagine the Inca Empire at its peak in the 15th century, a sprawling domain stretching over 2,500 miles along the spine of the Andes. That's like walking from New York to Los Angeles with a few alpacas in tow. But here's where it gets juicy. In a society without written language, textiles took on roles we typically reserve for paper and ink. These weren't just threads. They were threads of communication, power, and control. Enter the quipu, an ingenious system of knotted strings that was the Inca's version of a spreadsheet. Forget Excel, this was data management avant-garde style. Each knot and colour represented different data points, resources, population numbers, even astronomical events. It's like a Rolodex meets an abacus with a dash of rainbow flair. Historians have long debated the full extent of the quipu's capabilities. But one thing's for sure, it was critical in keeping an empire this vast running smoothly. And if you think spreadsheets are dull, just imagine deciphering your tax return with a bunch of string. Now that's a real knotty problem. But let's not get tangled in the strings just yet. The Inca trailblazers were also logistical masterminds, weaving together one of history's most impressive transportation networks long before the age of Google Maps. Their road system, known as the Chapaxian, was more than just a collection of paths. It was the empire's circulatory system, allowing goods, armies, and information to flow with remarkable efficiency. Stretching more than 25,000 miles, These roads connected the empire's diverse landscapes, from the arid coast to the lush mountains, with suspension bridges that would give any modern civil engineer a run for their money. And while we're on the subject, let's unravel the myth of the Inca as merely a warrior society. Sure, they had a military might that could rival any ancient superpower, but they were also savvy traders and administrators. The roads weren't just for marching armies, they were vital arteries for economic exchange. Llamas, those ever-reliable pack animals, transported everything from textiles to foodstuffs along these routes. Picture caravans of these fluffy, long-necked beasts winding through the Andes, carrying goods and gossip alike. Speaking of trade, let's talk about how textiles weren't just commodities, but symbols of authority. The Incas had a class of artisans known as the Akla, or chosen women, who were tasked with weaving the finest garments for the nobility. These weren't your average tailors. They were more like the haute couture designers of their day, crafting garments so exquisite that they could only be worn by the elite. And when I say exquisite, I mean garments that took months, sometimes years, to complete, using the finest alpaca wool and the most vibrant dyes. Wearing one of these tunics was like walking around with a neon sign that read, "I'm kind of a big deal." But let's not gloss over the realities faced by these artisans. Despite their skills, they were often part of the Mitsa system, a labour tax that required communities to contribute work to the state. While the romantic notion might be of a serene workshop filled with creative energy, the truth was often closer to a high-pressure assembly line. The demand for perfection was relentless, and the stakes were high. After all, when your client list includes the Supper Inca himself, you can bet there's no room for a dropped stitch. And let's debunk another myth while we're at it, the idea that the Inca economy was primitive. In reality, it was a finely tuned machine, operating without currency, but thriving on reciprocity and redistribution. The state took in goods like textiles and redistributed them as needed, a bit like a socialist utopia, but with more llamas and fewer pamphlets. This system not only ensured the empire's stability, but also reinforced the state's control over its subjects. It was as much a political tool as it was an economic necessity. But before we wrap up this textile tour, let's reflect on what these threads truly represent. They weren't just garments or data strings, they were the fibers holding together an entire civilization. They signified wealth, power, and identity, transcending their primary function to become essential components of the social fabric. The Incas understood that a well-woven textile could carry meaning far beyond its material worth, a lesson that resonates even today in our fast-fashion world. As we weave through this tale of threads and trade, it's clear that the Incas were more than just warriors or weavers. They were architects of a complex society where every thread had a purpose, every knot a story. And as we continue to unravel the mysteries of the past, we find that history is not just written in books, but woven into the very fabric of life. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the warp and weft of the ancient Andes, where each stitch brings us closer to understanding the intricate patterns of human civilization. And speaking of threads that bind, let's unravel how the Spanish threw the Inca textile industry into a tailspin like a cat with a ball of yarn. When Francisco Pizarro and his crew arrived in the early 16th century, they didn't just bring muskets and horses, they brought a whole new world order, one that would unravel the Andean way of life faster than you can say conquistador. First, let's talk about what happened when the Spaniards laid eyes on those exquisite Inca textiles. To them, these cloths were more dazzling than a Vegas light show. Here were garments that had taken years to produce, using skills honed over centuries. European collectors couldn't get enough, snapping them up like they were the latest designer handbags. But while the elite back in Europe flaunted these treasures, the artisans who created them were facing a grim reality. The Spanish colonization was nothing short of an economic earthquake. Pizarro's band didn't just topple an empire, they dismantled a finely tuned economic system and replaced it with one that prioritized European needs over local traditions. The Spanish encomienda system was like a corporate takeover, but with more swords and fewer board meetings. Indigenous communities were forced into labor, their skillful hands now crafting goods for their colonial overlords, not their own people. And let's not sugarcoat the impact of disease. Smallpox, influenza, and measles swept through the Andes like a viral tidal wave, decimating up to 90% of the indigenous population. Imagine entire villages, once vibrant with the clack of looms and the chatter of artisans, falling silent. The workforce behind those breathtaking garments was disappearing, leaving gaping holes not just in the production line, but in the social and cultural fabric. But hey, at least the Spanish brought some shiny new commodities, right? Enter sheep's wool, the colonial equivalent of an unwanted gift. While the Andean weavers had mastered the art of alpaca and vicuña fibers, the Spaniards introduced sheep as part of their agricultural overhaul. This shift wasn't just a change in material, it was like switching from a Stradivarius to a ukulele. The quality of textiles suffered, the rich hues and fine weaves giving way to more utilitarian, less vibrant products. It's worth noting that the Spanish weren't entirely blind to the value of Andean textiles. They recognized their potential in the global market, but their methods of capitalizing on it were, shall we say, less than humane. Forced labor and heavy tributes became the norm. In some cases, communities had to produce specific quantities of textiles as tribute, a sort of colonial quota system that made the Inca mitre look like a holiday. The Spanish crown, ever the opportunist, saw textiles as a commodity akin to silver or spices, another feather in the cap of their expanding empire. Now, let's not forget the irony of it all. These very textiles, which were being churned out under duress, were simultaneously being lauded in Europe as the pinnacle of craftsmanship. Letters and records from the time, such as those by Pedro Cieza de Leon, reveal a fascination with the vibrancy and complexity of Inca textiles. While European nobles draped themselves in Andean finery, artisans back in the Andes were eking out a living under the harsh new regime. And here's a kicker. The Spanish obsession with gold often overshadowed the economic potential of textiles. While conquistadors were busy melting down Inca treasures, they overlooked the fact that textiles, in their own right, were a form of wealth. The Incas had understood this intrinsic value, but to the Spanish, if it didn't glitter, it wasn't worth the effort. It's a classic case of missing the forest for the shiny, golden trees. In the wake of colonization, the once thriving Andean textile industry was left in tatters, its intricate designs and vibrant colors becoming relics of a bygone era. The looms that once wove the stories of a civilization now lay dormant, replaced by the monotonous churn of colonial demands. What was once a symbol of identity and power was reduced to a shadow of its former self, a poignant reminder of the cost of conquest. Yet, even in the face of such adversity, the spirit of Andean artistry persisted. Despite the oppressive conditions, threads of cultural resilience wove their way through the generations. Indigenous weavers held on to their techniques and traditions, passing them down like family heirlooms. While the Spanish may have tried to unravel the Andean way of life, they couldn't completely sever the ties that bound these communities to their rich heritage. So, as we unravel this chapter of history, it's clear that the story of Andean textiles is more than just a tale of threads and looms. It's a story of survival, resistance, and the enduring power of art to transcend even the harshest of realities. And as we continue to explore this vibrant tapestry, we'll see how these threads of resilience have woven their way into the modern era, where the legacy of ancient Peruvian weavers continues to inspire and endure. But that's a thread we'll pick up next time as we delve deeper into the warp and weft of history. So, let's pick up the thread where we left off and weave it into the tapestry of today. Fast forward through a few centuries, and those ancient Peruvian textiles are strutting down the runway, making a comeback that even the most seasoned fashion icon would envy. The textiles that once adorned empires are now inspiring contemporary designers, who are rediscovering the beauty and sustainability of these age-old crafts. It's as if the threads from ancient looms are whispering secrets to a new generation of artists and creators. Let's talk about the resurgence of traditional Andean techniques in modern fashion. Imagine a designer in New York or Paris, eyes widening at the sight of a 2,000-year-old Paracas textile, its colors still vivid, its patterns intricate. This is no mere nostalgia trip. Designers aren't just drawing inspiration, they're diving headfirst into the techniques that made these textiles legendary. And why wouldn't they? These methods have stood the test of time, proving that quality and craftsmanship never go out of style. Take the resurgence of hand-dyeing techniques, for example. In an era where fast fashion often means synthetic dyes and pollutants, there's a growing movement among designers to embrace natural dyes. Remember our tiny friend, the cochineal bug, Well, it's back in vogue. Modern designers are drawn to its brilliant crimson, not just for its aesthetic appeal, but for its sustainability. It's like the fashion world finally got the memo, nature does it better. In a world drowning in disposable fashion, these ancient methods offer a breath of fresh air and a splash of colour. But it's not just about aesthetics. There's a deeper, more poignant connection to these ancient textiles, sustainability. As climate change becomes the elephant in the room that no one can ignore, the fashion industry is in desperate need of a makeover. Enter the wisdom of the Andes, where sustainable practices were the norm long before it became a buzzword. Alpaca wool, for instance, is not only luxurious and warm, but also environmentally friendly. Alpacas tread lightly on the earth, literally and figuratively. Unlike sheep, they don't uproot the grass, making them the eco-friendly darlings of the textile world. And let's not forget the artisans. In a world where machines churn out clothes faster than you can say retail therapy, there's a growing appreciation for the hands that craft each piece. Modern brands are partnering with indigenous artisans, recognizing not just their skill, but the cultural heritage they represent. This isn't charity, it's a smart business move. Consumers are hungry for authenticity, and what's more authentic than a garment woven with centuries of tradition? Brands like Alpa and Kuna are leading this charge, proving that the past doesn't just belong in museums, it belongs in our wardrobes. But let's not romanticize it too much. This isn't just about pretty clothes and eco-friendly practices. There's a complex history woven into every stitch, a history of resilience and survival against the odds. It's important to remember that these textiles are more than just fashion statements, they're narratives of cultural identity and resistance. For every garment sold, there's a story of a community that kept its traditions alive, despite colonization and cultural erasure. It's a reminder that history isn't just a subject to be studied. It's a living, breathing tapestry that continues to shape our world. Speaking of shaping the world, let's talk about how these textiles have influenced contemporary art. Artists like Cecilia Paredes and Grimanesa Amoros are drawing on their Peruvian heritage, creating works that blend traditional motifs with modern aesthetics. Paredes, for instance, is known for her body painting and photography that often incorporate traditional patterns, transforming her own body into a canvas that bridges past and present. It's a testament to the enduring power of these textiles, a reminder that art is not just about looking back, but moving forward. And then there's the myth-busting. For years, the narrative around Andean textiles was one of isolation, as if these artisans were quietly weaving in some forgotten corner of the world. But the truth is, these textiles were part of a vibrant trade network, a story of exchange and adaptation. They influenced and were influenced by cultures far beyond the Andes. Today, as we see these influences ripple through modern design, it's clear that history is not a series of isolated events, but an interconnected web, a global conversation that's been going on for millennia. So, what's the takeaway here? It's simple. The threads of the past are still weaving their way through our lives, reminding us that innovation doesn't mean reinventing the wheel. Sometimes it's about looking back and appreciating the wheel we already have. In a world obsessed with the next big thing, there's something profoundly grounding about turning to ancient practices, finding in them not just beauty, but wisdom. It's a lesson in humility, a reminder that sometimes the most forward-thinking innovations are those that reach back into history. As we wrap up this journey through the vibrant world of ancient Peruvian textiles, let's remember that this isn't just a story of fabric and fashion. It's a story of human creativity and resilience, of cultures that thrived in the face of adversity and left a legacy that continues to inspire. Whether it's a designer in Milan or an artisan in Cusco, the threads of the past continue to influence the present, weaving a tapestry that's as rich and complex as the cultures that created it. In the end, it's a reminder that history isn't just a series of dates and events. It's a living, breathing entity, ever-evolving and infinitely fascinating. So the next time you slip on a garment or admire a work of art, think of the countless threads of history woven into its fabric. Each stitch, each pattern, a testament to the power of creativity and the enduring legacy of those who came before us. And there you have it, another chapter closed, but the story? Oh, it's far from over. These ancient threads will continue to unravel, inspiring creators and dreamers alike. So keep your eyes open and your curiosity piqued. because the past has a way of sneaking into the present, weaving tales that are as vibrant as they are timeless.